All right. We live. What's up, family? It's DivineProspect, Kingdom Harbinger Ministries, and I'm here to give you guys an exclusive presentation on this morning. Actually, it's 12 a.m. on Monday morning, and this is the long-awaited Crows on the Strawman, the full debate PowerPoint that they didn't want you to see, and I'm going to present that for you guys this morning. I know it's Sunday night, and Sunday night, I'm going to Monday morning, and it's late for a lot of you guys. I know a lot of y'all got to work tomorrow. I know I got to grind tomorrow as well. But for those of you, the real troopers, who have 2 hours or so to go in, let's do it. And I want to make the sacrifice. I mean, again, I was supposed to do this back on Friday. I mean, a lot of stuff came up. Even right now, I have a headache, and I'm pretty tired, but I want to get this out because I have other projects that I got to take care of this week. Now, this is going to be the live stream version, which is only going to be 720p. After I do the live stream, I'm going to produce and put out the official version. So while this live stream is going on, once I start the presentation, I'm going to be recording the official version, which will be in 1080p. So it'll be much clearer, better sound quality as well, because I'm using a professional mic for that. And you'll also see a clip video of me in the top left corner, as well as my logo and everything like that. So it'll be a little bit more polished than this free version you guys are watching right now. You know what I'm saying? But let's get started. So I don't know. Hopefully, if I get done with this in time, if I get done with this in about two hours, 15 minutes, it's going to be at least 2 hours. Now, at most, maybe 2.5 hours, no more than 3. And I hope it doesn't take that long. But after it's done, for those of you who may still be awake, who can afford to still be awake, I'll probably take a question or two. Or what I'll do is tomorrow evening, I'll do a follow-up session for those of you who may have questions in regards to this video. And I'll take some questions from you guys in regards to this live stream session. And then, hopefully that will, give some insight, give some feedback, input to see how much of the PowerPoint you guys was able to see. Also, thank you guys for tuned in yesterday and watched those videos I put up, those random videos I put up. Put a lot of good information in it. So for those who haven't seen it, you can go ahead and share with other people and watch it for yourself. It's very enlightening. And I was encouraged to do more videos like that, so I will. So you'll probably get them maybe once or twice a week, giving you guys updates and for random information, stuff like that, in between the other quality videos that I put up on Kingdom Harbinger Ministries YouTube channel. Also, we're going to be improving a lot of our audio visual equipment, and we're going to be doing better editing, making things more polished for you guys to enjoy. So we're going to start working on that, and those type of videos will be out for you guys in another couple of months. We should have that down pat. All right. So now I'm not going to be able to see the chat, right, when the PowerPoint is up. So if you're trying to ask me questions or make any comments, I won't be able to see it. Now, once the PowerPoint presentation is over, then the official recording will be over. Then I can go back to the chat and I can see what's going on. For those of you who are still awake and are watching this, take this link and share it everywhere, right? We want everybody to tune into this, okay? Because this is imperative that we take this information, especially if you're a Hebrew Israelite and you know people who are Hebrew Israelites. Please, tag them in this, because a lot of them have seen the debate, but unfortunately, a lot of them are not going to see this PowerPoint presentation, except for those who are watching now and those of you who share. So share this link. All right. So I'm gonna check the chat. Let me know if you guys can see and hear me clearly. If you can see and hear me clearly, then we can get started. Let me know if you guys can see and hear me clearly. All right. Let me go ahead and check. You see. Hold on, fam. Let me go ahead and check. Let me see. Okay. Let's see. All right. Let me say shout outs to a couple of people. Who's there? Alvin. So shalom, Alvin. Hanaka, shalom. Let me see. Rodrigo, Global Purpose. JP Fearson. So can y'all, okay, somebody says I can see you, yes, hear you, yes. Okay, cool. All right, so we got over 30 people watching it. Okay, not bad. On a Monday morning. All right, so go ahead and like I said, share this with everybody you know, so they can tune in. I'm glad everything's working well with my my webcam and the bandwidth on my router, so that way we get in the full 150 megabytes per second. That allows good quality and audio visual quality that you guys are peeping right now. All right, so I'm about to go. Wow, a lot of people jumping in here now. I'm about to go get started. Also, my family who are Kemetic or in the conscious community, definitely check out this PowerPoint as well, so you guys can get a better understanding of the Hebrew Israelite culture, historical culture, and the paradigm in which we use to view our culture, cultural history, create our solutions out of it. And this is based on proper scholarship, all right? So I'm gonna try to be as focused as I can, because like I said, I'm a little sleepy and I have a headache, but I'm gonna get through this, all right? Because this is, I'm telling you, man, this is a great presentation. I know y'all gonna enjoy it. So for those of you, and this is my quick intro real quick before I start the recording, and the official video is not gonna have none of this. But for those of you who watched the lecture, you got to see my rebuttal part. So those who have seen it, you may be familiar with what I'm going to show in the beginning. Those who have not seen it, great. It's going to be a nice little treat for you. You guys definitely going to see that. But I'm going to get through the rebuttal portion first. Then I'm going to get into the second section and then move on from there. But the second section is really going to be the premise part that I wanted to convey that I didn't get a chance to do at the debate. All right. So go ahead, share this everywhere you can. You know, get all your family, your friends, your associates, everybody in this to watch this. We're going to show you some of the best scholarship that the Hebrew Israelite community has to offer. And again, this is not even everything, right? This is actually sampling bits from my Minority Report Part 1 lecture and my upcoming Minority Report Part 2 lecture, which the Part 1 was very in-depth, very in-depth. Part 2 is going to be even more in-depth. So this right here is 142 slides, and it's not going to compare to the almost 900 slides that's in the Minority Report. So Part 2 Minority Report is going to be like, I think it's like 300 and something slides that we're going to do on that. You know, like I think like 350 slides on that. But I'm going to run through it and you know, condense into about 2.5 to 3 hours. So right now I'm still waiting for a couple more people to jump in before we get started. So I'm just talking while that's happening. Does anybody have any questions in the chat? Please repeat the name of the video you just mentioned. The Minority Report Part 1 and my upcoming lecture, the Minority Report Part 2. All right, Part 2 will be later on this year. Part 1 is available now on my YouTube channel. Also, I want you guys to watch the video Revisiting Exodus 12:37, how many Israelites actually exited out of Egypt, as well as the other video that I have that's called Was Deciphering the Medjugorje Necessary to Formulate the Ancient Hebrew Abjad. So Minority Report Part 1, Revisiting Exodus 12:37, how many Israelites actually exited out of Egypt. And the third one is, was Deciphering the Medjugorje Necessary to Formulate the Ancient Hebrew Abjad. So these three videos right here pretty much is going to lay down a foundation, things you're about to see in this PowerPoint that's showing up. All right. So I don't see nobody's asking any questions. Peace, Monica. Peace, Arius. Peace, Latoya Loves Locks. Who else is in here? Yosef Ben Yisrael, Yaram Yahu, Danielle Knox, Global Purpose, Cohorts Music, Tanika West, Artism, Aisha Williams. Peace, peace, peace. All right. So Ryan Smith, Shalom. What time will you take this video down? I may not be able to watch it all tonight. It'll be up. Y'all can see it. You should be able to see it tomorrow. If not, the official video will be up. Official video will be up no later than Tuesday. It'll be up. All right. So if nobody has any questions, I'm about to get started. I don't see nobody asking any questions. So I'm assuming y'all good. And then I'll pause this so I could just focus on this. There we go. We don't want that taken away from the bandwidth. All right. Shalom Navia. All right. So I guess nobody got any questions. All right. So let me tell y'all the purpose of this and preface it real quick. And then I'm gonna start the official recording while I'm doing a live stream. So like I said, once you see the PowerPoint go up, I will not be able to respond to anything in the chat until after the PowerPoint is over. He said we ready. To after the PowerPoint is over. All right. Have you ever thought about giving a lecture on teaching Hebrew? Yes, and I've done that as well. If you guys want that, I could probably do a video for you guys, just breaking you into some of the basics for the novice. In this lecture, I'm actually going to parse out a particular section of a verse, so you can see some of the ways that I teach the Hebrew as well, which is important, right? Because we got to be able to demonstrate that as Hebrew Israelites that we know the intricacies of our culture, including the language as well, right? So I'm going to showcase a little bit of that in here also. All right. So since somebody has questions, let me preface it with saying this. So, you know, in regards to, you're welcome, in regards to the debate that occurred with me and Brother Jabari, I was only able to get my rebuttals to his video up. And unfortunately, I was unable to present my premise. He got a sample of it, and I think that's why they were doing their best to hinder me from putting it out. Because I'm also critiquing his video. Okay, I gotta mute this real quick because I'm also critiquing his video. Family, be sure, please share this on your social media, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, because I know a lot of people are asking about this. I'm getting a lot of Facebook messages now. I don't want nothing to disturb me, so I had to mute that real quick. So please share this. Anybody who's up needs to watch this. Even if you need to put your headphones in and fall asleep to it, do so and get this scholarship in your mind and your mental. All right. So I was recommended by the Brother Jabari to read his book, which I did and which I have here. I'm gonna show it to y'all to get his book. And his book is called, let me get it real quick for y'all. Let me get it so you can see what I'm talking about. Shalom McGee, Shalom Abdiel, do you believe the modern Hebrew is accurate? Good question. I'll take that another time. Questions pertaining to this PowerPoint or what you know of it. You feel me? That's what I want to take right now. So no offense. All the other questions, y'all can hold off on that. What do you think about the African worship of the Most High pre-Israel? Good question. Good question. Please note these questions down. I will be doing a follow-up live stream, and I will answer those questions for you. But if you have any questions, the Black Ab, Peace King, if you have any questions pertaining to the subject matter I'm discussing tonight, put it in the chat. So anyway, let me grab this real quick, family. So I'm watching the chat. As you can see, I'm always interfacing with the chat while I talk. And I think that this should happen with most people who do these live streams. They need to interface with the people in real time. Hold on, let me show you his book real quick. Now remember, when I put the official video out, it's not going to have none of this. So I'm just talking to y'all for the ones that's up. I'm interfacing with y'all while you're up. Let's see. Okay, here it is. So this is 1432. All right, so this is the brother's book right here. Right, so y'all can see it. Let me make sure y'all can see it. You see it? It says 7 Little White Lies by Jabari Ozaze. All right, it says the conspiracy to destroy the black self-image. All right, and hopefully you guys can see that. All right, so this is his book, and I went through his book. Let me just make sure y'all can see it. Yeah, you're probably not going to be able to see too much because of the white on the black on white. But he has this chapter right here. Let me see if this will come up. So he has 2 chapters that I'm going to deal with, but the one I'm primarily going to address is this one here. I don't know if y'all going to be able to see that. Let me see if I do this. I'll turn the light out. Okay, yeah. So if you see here, it says chapter 4, the Hebrew slaves built the pyramids. All right, and I'm going to address that. I'm going to address that more when I do the PowerPoint. But I told him, I said, listen, because since he asked me to read his book, I said, listen, after I finish reading your book, you're going to have to take this section out or redo it because you got some outdated information. So I have the brother's book, and in my PowerPoint, I'm going to address parts of his book. So just so you know the overview of the PowerPoint before I get into it. First, I'm going to open up and I'm going to define the term straw man, and I'm going to explain the title of the lecture. From there, the first part, I'm going to go into the rebuttal because him and Shaka made a video. So I'm going to go into that rebuttal. I'm going to make that quick because you guys can always go back and watch the actual debate and see that. After I do that section, then I'm going to tackle his book. After I tackle his book, I'm going to present some modern scholarship in regards to the ethnogenesis of the ancient Israelites. After I do that, I'm going to transition into the heritage section. And from the heritage section, we're going to get into the solutions, which is not going to be that long. That's going to be a real brief section. All right. But the section that's going to take the most time is when I deal with his book and leading into the modern scholarship aspect. So those two parts are going to be a little lengthy, but everything else should be good. So now I'm looking at the time. It's 12:30. So I'm going to try to finish this within 2 hours. I'm going to strive my best, but I don't want to rush. And it's a good thing that I'm doing it like this because I don't have to rush. I can take my time. All right. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So give me a minute or two to get this official recording done. Let me start that. Now, remember, you're not going to be able to see me until the end. When it's over and I'm finished with the official recording, then I'll switch it back to webcam. You'll be able to see me. I'll check the chat to see what's going on in the chat. You can leave any questions if you want, and I'll try to address them if I have time. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me check on you on chat real quick. Grow Yah Yisrael, Shalom. Does Jabari adhere to the out of Africa theory? Yaram Yahu, yes, he does. What was the point of the suspect touch my ankh move, and do you regret touching it? Well, what he wanted to do was with the touches ankh, his objective was trying to proselytize and convert me over to the Kemetic side. So I guess he thinks his ankh has magical powers, and that the moment I grab it, I'll be transformed into some kind of Kemetic priest or something like that. I don't know. So when he first, offered it, I was like, nah, I don't know. Then the second time he insisted, so I didn't touch it. I said, listen, you can hold it. I'll put my hand under yours so the picture can be taken and it can show unity, but I'm not touching your ankh. And if you watch the live stream, that's exactly what happened. And then when I walked away, I was like, ouch, making fun of it. And he took a little offense to that. But hey, it is what it is. I'm not touching that ankh, buddy. Why am I doing that? I'm not doing that. So don't be misled. Again, it was in order to show unity, and it was supposed to be a promotional picture, because if people see something like that, they're going to be intrigued to say, well, what is this about? So don't let it take you somewhere that it doesn't need to go. I didn't touch the ankh. I put my hand under his while he was holding it to show unity, so we could take a picture and use that to help promote or market the actual debate. All right. So that's just showing y'all what that means. All right. Master Prophet E. Bernard Jordan. That's funny. What exactly do you feel was Brother Jabari's most hideous attack on Hebrews? His most hideous attack on Hebrews is trying to deny the Exodus, which I'm going to go into today. All right. Quick question. Is the ankh supposed to be a penis and vagina? Not according to the ancient Egyptians, right? But people in modern day times who subscribe to the Kemetic culture, they make all types of subscriptions to what they believe it is. You know what I'm saying? So the most important thing is anytime somebody makes a reference to say, oh, it represents the womb and the penis and balls and ovaries and all this other stuff, say to them, can you show me a wall relief or somewhere in a papyrus where it tells me that this is exactly what it is? And ask them to read the glyphs for you too. Because I'll be doing that with them now that I read the glyphs. And a lot of times they shy away from that. So a lot of that is pseudo stuff, man. It's really pseudo stuff. Okay. You should have asked Jabari to take a picture holding Torah. That would have been great if I had the Torah with me. I actually had my my zeets, and I was going to have them put it on, but we didn't get a chance to get into that because I was bombarded with so many questions afterwards. And then as you see in the video, you see Shaka and you see Jabari ask me questions, and two other people in the audience is there, and then sign editors there. So it was a lot going on that I had to handle in real time. And I'm telling you guys, you know, when you see me do this stuff, it's not easy. You know, I'm used to it because I'm a teacher. So I'm used to students asking me a whole bunch of questions, or being in an environment with people who are my peers and they ask critical questions. So I'm used to responding on the fly, you know what I'm saying? And I'm much more engaging and much more prolific when I'm presenting something in front of an audience, or when I'm in a roundtable type of situation and I'm going back and forth with people. When I do presentations like this, I'm really not my brightest, just so y'all know, because for some reason I draw energy when there's physical people in my presence, okay? But I digress, all right? So hopefully I answered all your questions. Let me get started, all right? So I see, wow, almost over 70 people in here. All right, keep sharing it, family. Keep sharing and get everybody up in here. Everybody up in here, all right? So all right, let me get started. So again, like I said, once I get started, you're not gonna hear, you're not gonna see a lot from me. As far as the webcam, you're not gonna, I'm not gonna be able to respond to your, they say Ankh means life. What does the Ankh represent? Yes, the Ankh is supposed to represent life, and sometimes it can also represent sacrifice, all right, depending upon what war relief we're looking at. Always take people to the primaries for explanations on things, and not their own ideology. That's typically what I do, right? Yeah, they always do that. They always try to roadblock me. They always try to set me up, or they always try to have the advantage or leverage over me because they can't deal with me one-on-one. It's very difficult for them to do that. So they know they have to do it. So once you see this PowerPoint, you see exactly why they had to do what they had to do. Man, almost 80 people in here. Cool, 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 cool. All right. So now I might draw some strength for you on stay up. All right. Shalom, King's son. Shalom, shalom, shalom. All right, so let me go ahead and get started. Should I be studying Paleo Hebrew or Modern Hebrew? Freddie Williams, what I will recommend is you want to study Classical Hebrew, which has the diacritic marks, or the Nikud Dot, and that's the best way to get into the language. And then from there, you can transition into the Paleo. But if you want to learn the actual letters, I would say start with the pictographic, then the Paleo, and then the Modern script. All right, so when I learned it looking at the ancient pictographic, which represents the Proto-Sinaitic script, as well as the Paleo script. And then from those two scripts, it helped me to internalize, and it helped me to visualize and understand the concept behind utilizing certain characters to represent elements in the culture. And then from there, I transitioned to actually learning the script by using the block script Hebrew. All right. So again, biblical Hebrew or classical Hebrew with the block script is the best way to learn the language, because Bronx Bowler says, I stay doing late night seminars. Yeah, I know, right? I be up all the time, man. All right. Let the man start the lecture. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. Let's get started. All right. So give me a moment. Let me go ahead and transition. And let me get this recording up. All right. So I'm going to change my screen real quick. Okay, so you guys are gonna see my screen as I transition. So let me transition. All right. Bronx Ball is crazy. Yeah, y'all can talk to each other in there while I do this. All right, I'm setting up now. Hold on. All right, let me switch this. All right. So now I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so let's enable this. Get the webcam going. All right, see? So y'all see me up here at the top left. So that's going to be an official video. The watermark is also going to be an official video. Okay. So let me check in with you guys real quick. Let me see. Thank y'all for the support. My practice to you from being in Nigeria, living in Malaysia. Respect to you. Peace, Dato. Grow y'all. All right. So let's see. Watching from Bangkok. Oh, peace, Earth brother. Peace, peace. All right. We got almost 80 plus people up in here. All right. Cool. All right. So let's get started, family. Here we go. Now I'm amped up. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let's get started. Let's get this thing on a road, show on a road. All right, so I'm done with the commentary. As you hear me speak, this is for the official recording. All right, so you're not going to hear from me again to you guys until the end of the lecture. Hopefully you guys can hear me loud and clear, but now we're about to get started. So let's get this stuff show on the road. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Peace and shalom, family. This is DivineProspect of Kingdom Harmony Ministries. And today we're going to deal with crows on a straw man. This is the full debate PowerPoint that they didn't want you to see. And in this presentation that I'm going to do for you guys on today, it's going to be very thought-provoking. It's going to present a lot of great conversations, table conversations, icebreakers. And what it's going to do is it's going to showcase the latest scholarship designed to substantiate the existence of the Ancient Israelites, the Exodus account, as well as other references from modern-day scholarship that verify the claims that our community had been trying to convey for a long time now, okay? So as you can see in the image here, you see a scarecrow there, but there's crows on the scarecrow, okay? And we're going to explain what that is in 1 second, but let's get to the first slide, right? So the first slide, logical fallacy, straw man. Let's see what that is, okay? Misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack. This is the fallacy of refuting a caricatured or extreme version of somebody's argument rather than the actual argument they've made. Often this fallacy involves putting words into somebody's mouth by saying they've made arguments that they haven't actually made, in which case the strawman argument is a veiled version of argumentum ad logicam or logicam. One example of a strawman argument would be to say, Mr. Jones thinks that capitalism is good because everybody earns whatever wealth they have. But this is clearly false because many people just inherit their fortunes, when in fact, Mr. Jones had not made the earnings argument and had instead argued, say, that capitalism gives most people an incentive to work and save. The fact that some arguments made for a policy or a culture are wrong does not imply that the policy or culture itself is wrong. All right. So the reason why we're discussing the straw man or crows on a straw man is because whenever you misrepresent somebody's argument, what you're typically doing is creating a better argument for yourself because you've created a caricatured or a fictitious perspective of that opponent. So that way it's easier for you to beat up because you already have a calculated method of addressing and approaching that person's arguments. Okay. So the reason why I call it crows on a straw man is because, as you know, the straw man is the scarecrow. And scarecrows are designed to scare birds, right? To prevent them from eating the grains and eating the crops that's in the field of the farmer. But the problem is, after a while, if that straw man or that scarecrow is not moved, then the birds will eventually realize that it's not real and they will pick at it. They will still eat the food and not be afraid of it. So what this means is that there are a lot of people who come against the Hebrew Israelite community. And what they do is that they already have a presumption in their mind of what the community actually believes, and therefore they create this false argument, not false argument, a false straw man or straw man argument, excuse me, that they can address and they can beat up because they know that once they guide us into that straw man, that they have a calculated way of attacking us, and then that will deduce our actual position and remove us from our inheritance or our cultural lineage, right? So just because, like the statement says here, just because arguments made for a culture may be wrong, meaning that there are some people in our community who make arguments on behalf of the culture, does not mean that the culture itself is wrong. So just because some people may make these arguments, and they may be weak arguments, faulty arguments, or not as effective arguments, does not mean that the actual validity of the culture, authenticity of the culture is wrong. All right. So again, hopefully you understand that. So going into this, that's going to be the first section we're going to address. All right. So next slide, HOK, House of Consciousness video entitled Shaka Amos and Bro Divine, When Two Worlds Collide, ... You can go to YouTube and you can check out that video. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to address about 24 various strawman arguments that was made in that video. And in doing so, I'm going to go through this real quick, because actually in the debate itself that I had with Brother Jabari, I actually went through this section. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this section. I'm going to use this so that way those who have not seen the debate can actually see it in here. And then I'm going to go right into the section after this, which is actually the premise of the actual PowerPoint itself. All right. So let's move forward. All right. So strawman argument number 1. All right. Sanetta's claim was Divine is looking to unite our community under the banner of Hebrew. And that's at the 5-minute, 9-second marker. And Jabari agreed. Right. My response, I guess this was overlooked in my 2014 lecture, which happens to be part 2 of the only presentation of mine that Jabari watched. All right. And here's the video that we're talking about right here.
We need to come and band together under RBG. We can have our cultural identities, because if we look at the Europeans, there's all different factions and nations in the Europeans. But when it comes down to them doing business, when it comes down to them enslaving, like we saw the transatlantic slave trade, they came together in unity and handled business. They didn't sit there and bicker and fight about, okay, well, you're from France and you're from England. Yeah, they had their little differences and so forth. But ultimately, when it came to them united together as a world power today, the EU, they know how to put their differences aside and come to us. That's the #1 weapon, is our disunity that our oppressors are using us today, and we need to unify. RPG.
All right. So you can watch this part in the beginning of a video entitled Does the Bible Provide Insight on the Conditions of Blacks in America, Part 2. And my premise is always unity under RBG. This is why a moniker that I use to label my movement and what I'm doing is called RBG Hebrews, or #RBG Hebrews. And the objective is I have a particular spiritual system or cultural disposition, but when I work with other organizations and other groups who may not share that same subscription, I leave my numerator to the side and I discuss the common denominators or the common societal ills that we all experience, and come to the table with these various groups and organizations to say, hey, how can we cross-exchange resources, knowledge, information to better our communities that we're in, and be able to extract these paradigms from out of our cultures and share it with one another to fix societal ills in our community with one another. So it's a way that we can come together without agreeing to be the same people or having the same belief or the same subscription, but also have a functional polity, so that way we can discuss issues that plague our community and present solutions to resolve them. So apparently, Brother Jabari only saw part 1 of Does the Bible Provide Insight on the Condition of Blacks in America. He obviously didn't watch part 2, because this is an immediate beginning of part 2. And Sanetta also forgot this part of the video. And I know he did, because that's why he made the comment that he did. But Jabari, instead of him going back to investigate it, decided to jump on the bandwagon and agree. So this is how I project my position in regards to unity, and that's under the banner of RBG. All right, so let's move forward. So what are we unifying under? RBG, right? Here's a quote from Marcus Garvey, and this image says, show me the race or nation without a flag, and I will show you a race of people without any pride. Right? Marcus Garvey said the thing to do is to get organized. Keep separated and you will be exploited, you will be robbed, you will be killed. Get organized and you will compel the world to respect you. Second quote, this propaganda of disassociating Western Negroes from Africa is not a new one. For many years, white propagandists have been printing tons of literature to impress scattered Ethiopia, especially that portion within their civilization, with the idea that Africa is a despised place inhabited by savages and cannibals where no civilized human being should go, especially Black civilized human beings. All right. Third quote, unite all people of African ancestry of the world to one great body to establish a country and absolute government of their own, which we can actually do when I get into the last slide in regards to having our own body politics. So that way we can come to the table, work together to ensure that we are buffering white supremacy and that we are enabling ourselves to be more able to enjoy these type of discussions that we're having and being able to present this type of information and education for our community. All right. Now, additional lectures where I express my sentiments regarding my stance on unification and solutions via my cultural paradigm for the community as a whole is these 4 videos. One of them is called Globalizing Black Power. You can go back to Kingdom Harbinger Ministries, which is this YouTube channel that you're watching this on, and you can look for that video. Another one is called Domestic Reparations and Motherland Repatriation. A third one is called Economic Subversion to Autonomous Conversion. And a 4th one is called The Template for Building the Black Community Part 1. These are great videos that deal with solutions and my ideology behind unification and how to successfully make it work. A 5th video you can go back and watch is called Independence Nay. And that's another video that I talk about that involves unity, and that also involves a plan to solve the societal ills within our community. All right, let's move forward. Strawman Argument number 2. Jabari's claim, my description of myth is a linear Western description, right? My response, not necessarily. This argument is formulated from a casual lecture I did in 2014 when I utilized a Merriam-Webster dictionary definition for the term myth, generally speaking. I actually agree with this, and it's in an excerpt from Jabari's book. In actuality, myth is a story or parable which provides a profound telling of basic truths. They are constructed to provide a deeper meaning or understanding of how to live. As long as we continue to assign value to our spiritual myths according to their historical factuality, we are reducing our religious texts to newspapers. History tells us what happened, and myth explains what should continue to happen. Let's move forward. Strawman Argument number 3. Jabari's claim, speaking ill of our ancestors violates my act. People who identify as Hebrews speak ill of Kemet. My response, when did I do this? Please cite a video where I spoke ill of Kemet. Literary references to the ancient Israelites' close affinity to Africans and or Hamites, right? So we identify from my disposition, Africans can consist of the overarching umbrella terms of Hamites and Shemites on the continental tectonic plate of Africa, all right? So the ancient Israelites who migrated from the Levant region and made their way into Africa will be considered Shemites. And by virtue of them living and dwelling on the African tectonic plate would make them Africans. The Hamites, on the other hand, would be Northeast Africa, and those regions in Northeast Africa and the people that populated those areas of Northeast Africa, going all the way down to the base of the Great Lakes region. And those individuals that were there from South Africa, Central Africa, and Northeast Africa migrated west and populated West Africa. All right. So you have a mixed hybrid of Shemites and or Hamites according to the cultural literature and how it conveys the understanding of how tribal systems are differentiated. Okay. So I'm gonna go through some scriptures real quick, right? First one is Genesis 16:1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maid whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abraham, now behold, Yah has prevented me from bearing children. Please go into my handmaid. Perhaps I will obtain children through her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So we have a situation where, hold on for 1 second. We have a situation where Hagar is the handmaid of Sarah, and Hagar is an Egyptian. So now we have Egyptians that are keeping company with the Semitic individuals that we see here according to the cultural literature. All right. Genesis 46:20 says, now to Joseph in the land of Mizraim or Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Asenath or Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore to him. So now we see that Joseph had married Asenath and had children via Asenath, which is Manasseh and Ephraim, and his father-in-law was the priest of On, right? Which by virtue and by proxy of his father-in-law being this, inducted Joseph into the priesthood of On, okay? The priesthood of On, or those priests of Anu or Heliopolis, were called the great seers, because they were able to see things, you know what I'm saying, that other individuals wasn't able to see. The dream perchant is an example of how sacred dreams were to these people, and deciphering these dreams made you a great seer. So this shows why we have the union of the two and the production of offspring from an Egyptian and from who? An Israelite, right? So this is important. Keep this in mind, family, right? Exodus 12:38, a mixed multitude also went up with them, along with flocks and herds, a very large number of livestock. So a mixed multitude, which means when we don't just have the primary pure stock of ancient Israelites, there were other groups that was with them, both Hamitic and both Shemitic, that was mingled with them. All right. Leviticus 24:10, now the son of an Israelite woman whose father was an Egyptian went out among the sons of Israel. Here we have a situation where there was a child who was a result of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father. So we see, again, intermingling between the two. Number 12:1, Moshe had married a Cushite. Again, Moses, who was the proponent that was used to initiate this new covenant and deliverance of the Israelites into the promised land, he had a Cushite wife. All right. Moving forward, Deuteronomy 20:27, you shall not detest an Egyptian because you are a stranger in his land, and the sons of the third generation who are born to them may enter into the assembly of Yah. Again, it's telling you do not detest the Egyptian and that they are allowed into the assembly after the third generation. All right, let's move forward. 1 Kings 3:1, Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Mizraim, and married his daughter. He also made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom Solomon had married. So Solomon had married the Pharaoh's daughter. So we have another intermingling of the two, and there were children that was produced from here. And Solomon adored her so much that he made a house, a distinct separate house for her as well. All right. Isaiah 19:25, Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh will bless them, saying, Baruch, or blessed be Mizraim, my people. All right. So the Most High, by virtue of the Israelites scattered into Egypt, he also opened up his salvation to Egypt because the scattered of Israel was amongst the Egyptians, and therefore by proxy of their connection to the Israelites, the Most High was going to look in a positive light towards the Egyptians. All right, let's move forward. Jeremiah 38:7, but Ebed-Melech, a Cushite, an official in the royal palace. So the Israelites had Cushites that was in the royal palace, officials that were working in the royal palace. Okay, this is a very intimate situation as a king to have these Cushites around you. They wouldn't have been estranged from them unless there was some form of relation, right, between the two. All right, Amos 9:7, are you not Israelites the same to me as the Cushites, declares Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh. So he's making, again, a relationship comparison between the Cushites and the Israelites. So how can the text be anti-African or teach us to be anti-African, anti-Hamitic, when we see all of these relationships with the Egyptians, with the Cushites, and the mixed multitude that is replete throughout the text? So Jabari's argument in regards to that, me hating or hating the ancestors of the Commission people or the Kemet people, is false and is unfounded, and he has no evidence of anything in a video where I've made that claim. And I made it clear the close relationships between the two, and this is replete throughout the text, and this is obviously why I am not anti-African or anti-Hamitic in any way. All right, let's move forward. Strawman argument number 4, you cannot say that Hebrew people brought civilization to the world. My response, when did I say this? Please cite a video where I made this statement. Strawman argument number 5, Jabari's claim, he mentioned the Hyksos, but doesn't discuss them. So he's saying, I talk about the Hyksos, but I don't discuss them. Right. And as you can see here, this is a excerpt from his book, and I don't need to read it. It's on the screen. Y'all can check it out for yourselves. But my response is this is simply not true, because I do talk about and mention the Hyksos. Right. And the Minority Report Part 1, I have a whole section where I talk on the Hyksos, and the time marker is right there. And you can see this is a screenshot where I'm actually talking about the Hyksos. And you guys can go back and check out the Minority Report Part 1 on my on this YouTube channel. And you can actually see this for yourself. Let's move forward. Strawman argument number 6. When he paints all of Africa with a broad brush of Ethiopia, which is not the real name of the country, by the way, he does a disservice. My response, we all know some historical names for Ethiopia were the kingdom of Aksum, Abyssinia, and East Al-Kabulan. I never painted Ethiopia as if it represents all of Africa, because that would be extremely absurd. I referenced it in a lecture because it contained the sites of Herto, Bori, Omo 1 and Omo 2, which house some of the earliest Homo sapien bones ever discovered. Ethiopia is also noted as being one of the only African countries to stave off colonialism longer than any other African country. In concert with that, I do agree with these quotes, which further proves my point. Black men of Carthage, Ethiopia, of Timbuktu, and Alexandria gave the likes of civilization to the world. Marcus Garvey. We see a new Ethiopia, a new Africa, stretching the hands of influence throughout the world, teaching man the way of life and peace. Marcus Garvey. So here we have Marcus Garvey, who is uplifting Ethiopia. And this man, Brother Jabari, said he's a Garveyite, but then he gets mad when I have made a reference to Ethiopia's influence in the rest of the world, but yet he's a Garveyite. And this is what Garvey's view of Ethiopia was. Very interesting. Strawman argument number 7. Jabari's claim, if you are African, you cannot find yourself in a tradition that is purely patriarchal. My response, Jabari clearly did not watch my lecture entitled Closed Mouth Didn't Get Pled. He did not see my lectures where I speak about pre-exilic Israel's exaltation of the feminine consort to Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh, Asherah, that was later suppressed by Judean scribes and replaced with Chachma, Ruach, and then Shekinah in the Talmud. All right. You can go back and watch my lecture, A Closed Mouth Didn't Get Pled, where I discuss, was the Bible or the culture that's in the Bible purely patriarchal? And as you can see, the slide that I have up there, and if you go back and watch the video, I give the time marker right there, you can see that I don't teach that. I never teach that. And what I do teach is that that pure patriarchal element came during Babylonian captivity, and it was a reason for that, all right? And I'll discuss that in the follow-up videos. Move forward, all right? Looking at these three artifacts right here, at Untitled Chapter is the modern name of the archaeological site in the northeastern portion of the Sinai Peninsula, nearly 50 kilometers or 31 miles south of Kadesh, late 9th to early 8th century BCE, right? Pt.1 says, say to the king, say to Yahalalel, and to Yoasa, and to blank, I bless you by Yahuwah of Shamariam, which is Samaria, and by Asheratah, right? And if we look at this second inscription, it says, Amariyanu says, say to my Lord, are you in peace? I bless you by Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh of Teman, and by Asher Satah, excuse me. May he bless you and keep you and be with you, my Lord. To Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh of Temna and Asheratah, all what he requires of a man to act with compassion, and Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh will give him according to his heart, all right? The other fragments or parts that are broken, again, may the days be long and may they be satisfied. Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh of Teman and of Asheratah, Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh of Teman and Asheratah favored. And when you see Teman, you'll see a verse in the scriptures where it says that Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh came from Teman, right? Which we're going to see, which is part of Mount Sinai towards the south in Midian and towards enough of Seir where the Edomites dwell. That was the region of Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh, right? According to what we see here, and also according to the biblical text. I also touch on this in the Minority Report Part 1. At Khirbet el-Qam, it's an archaeological site from the West Bank in the territory of the biblical kingdom of Judah, between Lachish and Hebron, 40 kilometers to the west of the latter. Second half of the 8th century BCE, we have something here that says, Uriahu, the prosperous, his inscription, I bless Uriahu by Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh. That's to save from his enemies, to save him for the sake of Asheratah, by Abiyahu, and to Asheratah, Asheratah. Again, looking at this, we see again that the people in the pre-exilic Israel point in time identify the feminine element of the creator as being Asheratah, and then later on when the text was redacted by Judean scribes, they looked down upon it because the people was actually worshiping this more than they were supposed to. They was putting it before Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh, right? So what they did was they because the Judean scribes, especially during captivity, were redacting the text, they shined a negative light on those who was worshiping Asheratah, but they also replaced that feminine aspect of the creator with the Ruach, right? With Chachma, and then later on in Talmudic writings, the Shekinah, right? And that's what they call the mercy seat, the essence of the presence of the creator over the mercy seat. They call that the Shekinah glory, all right? So let's move forward. You can see here from this, I'm not going to read this, but y'all can see it. I deal with African patriarchal systems. The Ndi-Igbo people is a purely patriarchal system, and it's a West African culture. So when you're talking about, oh, the only way you can be African is to deal with some form of matriarchy, I'm like, well, this African cultures that is purely patriarchal. What do you say about that? He never addressed it in debate. African patriarchal system, pre-colonial, lyede-Ame, right? We have an abstract here. This paper examines the social, political, and economic roles of women in pre-colonial lyede. It challenges the myth that African women have been among the most oppressed in the world. This paper also identifies the different practices which enhance or diminish the status of women in pre-colonial lyede. If you read down to the other highlight, it says the authors of this paper are more pessimists who are of the view that women exercise considerable power in the past among the lyede people. However, present writers are also conscious of the fact that since pre-colonial lyede was a patriarchal society, women undeniably were victims of male oppression and such aspects of circumcision, widowhood, and the centralization of political authority. All right, so let's move forward. So my argument number 8, Barthes claimed the Bible was curated by Europeans. My response, at some point made in history, this is true, but I read several manuscripts that haven't been, such as Dead Sea Scrolls, which I went over in the other video that I did, Samaritan Pentateuch, Syriac Peshitta, Masoretic text, Ethiopic Ge'ez Bible, and the East Egyptian Sahidic Tanakh translations, right? Also, the unofficial curation or canonization of the Bible occurred by the end of the 5th century CE, and then later officially at the Council of Trent in 1546. Neither of these incidences have any bearing on the manuscript primaries that I read and analyze today. All right, move forward. Strawman argument number 9. If you're going to read those texts, you must re-Africanize them before living by them. That means you must put it back in its indigenous, native setting, right? By restoring or reconstructing the worldview of the peoples during that time and not seeing it through the contemporary modern lens that religious organizations has given us to see the culture, right? Because this will put it back into its African state. And we say that when we're talking about African, we're talking about any people that resided on the continent or the tectonic plate of Africa. They are considered Africans. But under that umbrella of African, you have other tribes. So we have categories for 2 tribes or phylums from that, which is Hamitic and Shemitic. And then from there, you have various tribes that come out of those lineages according to the cultural literature. This is how we view the term African, and why I myself say that by proxy of their living or dwelling on the tectonic plate, they are African people, right? But they are a distinct tribe amongst other African peoples, okay? So again, I reconstruct pre-exilic Israel from the Exodus to the captivity of Assyria and Babylon. And during that pocket of time, my objective is to restore and reconstruct the way that those people lived, how they viewed everything, how they worshiped their patron deity, the diet that they had, the political stresses that they encountered, the other neighboring cultures, etc. Okay. My response I have, and if you familiarize yourself with my work, you would be aware that I've done that. Strawman argument number 10. If you read them, books of the Bible, as a scroll of human history or future, they will lead you back to a prone position to Europeans. So he's saying that if we use the Bible as a window into human history and human future, he says it's going to lead you back to a prone position to Europeans, because according to him, the Europeans made the Bible, which is a fallacy. All right. My response: when do I ever read the Bible as the only scroll of human history or future? When I teach it to my community, it's from the worldview of our culture. Sometimes I may share that same insight to others outside of us if they're interested. I always complement my teachings with contemporary history or future events not discussed in the text. I adapt my message to cater to the audience it's geared towards. All right. Strawman argument number 11. Jabari's claim. We got to be clear on what we are trying to do according to whose divine laws, according to whose history, according to whose legacy. Even if Jabari dismissed anybody who was Hebrew Israelites, had only joined people who, let's say, utilize African cultural worldviews, all of them have different divine laws that they follow. All of them have different histories and provenances, and all of them have different legacies and futures and customs and traditions. So how are you going to say, who are we going to? No, the people of the culture, particular culture, they're going to agree to the divine laws, history, and legacy of their culture. Right? So it's a fool's errand for him to try to unite everybody under the Kemetic when there's other African people who want to keep and adhere to their cultural paradigms that they have to solve their societal ills and promote them or perpetuate them as a people. Right? So you cannot erase that. But see, the bias is towards Hebrew Israelites. We can't have a cultural or spiritual system for any other African culture. They can, and he's willing to join with them and work with them, but not with Hebrew Israelites. Okay, that's a lot of hypocrisy right there. My response: that is dependent on the individual group. You will always have various tribes amongst African peoples with various customs, traditions, origins, mythology, histories, etc. According to Marcus Garvey's philosophy, it doesn't matter what your differences are, as long as we identify as Africans and a diaspora who seek to have solidarity with the continent of Africa and agree on our common denominators, you can believe whatever. The most important thing is to unite under a common banner that seeks to resolve the same experienced social ills we face together, such as white supremacy. All right. Strawman argument number 12. Jabari's claim: he was given the Bible in its current form, and he said there must be some knowledge about me in here. So what he's essentially done is he's following the rules used to annihilate African people, which is crazy, because I just showed you earlier the biblical text affinity towards Hamites. I showed y'all that. Okay. And also me being handing the Bible in its current form and said there must be knowledge of me in here. No. Like I said in my other video, I heard the claim about Hebrew Israelites. I wanted to say, listen, can this be proven outside the text? And once I was able to validate and authenticate it, I said, man, you know what? There got to be some more to us. I looked into it further, was able to make connections to my inherited heritage and say, wow, you know what? This speaks to me. All right. But essentially what Jabbar's doing is he's drawing conclusions. Right. That's what that image is there. My response, knowing my history and merging into Black consciousness, and after reading your book, I am in no way in acquiescence with that statement. If you believe so, please elaborate on a point-by-point basis from posteriori knowledge, that means knowledge based on experience, of my work or lifestyle. Argument, Strawman Argument number 13. Jabari's claim, DivineProspect subscribes to the 12 tribes chart. Really? What video did I ever say that I subscribe to the 12 tribes chart? Please cite a video where I made this assertion. You can't find no video like that because none exists. All right, and we talking about the modern 12 tribes chart that came from Arya, Masha, Yaakov from One West. You know, I don't have a subscription to it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I don't subscribe from it. I don't teach from it. So for somebody to say that I do subscribe to it without having any references to me speaking on it or teaching on it, it's obvious that they're not familiar with my work. Okay. So I'm at argument number 14, Jabari's claim, when you deal with history, and this is the reason why I'm not concerned about the debate, a picture of a people will be revealed. And I think this is why, instead of dealing with history of these people, he would rather talk to you about Adam, Eve, Moses, and Noah. Now, you know what's so ironic about this, family? For those of you who watch the debate, I strove not to use the Bible. He put me into the Bible. He wanted me to argue from the Bible. But yet in this video, he says here, and I think that that is why, instead of dealing with the history of these people, that's all I wanted to deal with, the history of the ancient Israelites. I didn't want to deal with the Bible, but he kept talking about, what about Noah? What about Ham, Shem, and Japheth? What about the flood? You know, what about this according to the Bible? What about, he kept asking me questions about the Bible. He did not care about the corrective history methodology that he approaches the emergence of the ancient Israelites. He didn't want to deal with that. He talked about it in this video, but when the debate came, he didn't want to talk about that. You know why? Because he saw that I understood corrective history, and I came there to deal with corrective history by objectifying my culture or looking at it objectively and presenting it back to the audience so they can see that I'm not viewing it from a biased perspective from being somebody that's associated with the culture. But he didn't want to deal with that. So this is why he kept going around and asking circular questions over and over and over again, because he kept tying me into the straw man that he built up, which was part of his pre-calculated plan to attack me. And every time I moved my way out of it and I objectively perceived the culture, right, and then convey that to the audience, he wasn't with it because he was not prepared for that type of debate. But as you can see here, this is the irony, right? This statement shows Jabari's lack of familiarity in regards to my scholarship, which is evident. Strawman Argument number 15. Jabari's claim, when you make the myth history, you are reading your spiritual text like it's a newspaper. The text conveys history, but also is replete with myth and legends that are mixed in with the text. Remember, this was written by Judean or Yahudim scribes, and there was a purpose for them compiling it, redacting it, and putting it together the way that they did to convey it over to the initiates, which are those who are the remnant of Israel, so they can understand the principles conveyed in there and how these principles and how these supernatural workings intertwine with the historical account that occurred. And the Bible has been used in order to find real archaeological history. And the Hittites are an example of that, right? Not even that. Synchronistic chronology was done by Egyptologists by using the Bible to find out when Taharka and Shabaka arrived in the Levant region, right? And when they came in and when they left out, when they had their campaigns all throughout, they used the Bible to synchronize that part of history with Egyptology. And I have a video on my YouTube channel that actually talks about that. It's very interesting. But when I go into the Minority Report Part 2, I'm going to delve into that intricately and meticulously. And I'm going to show you guys that. And I'm going to show you that all archaeologists, all historians, all Egyptologists, they are, not all of them, but the general consensus is they agree with this. All right, my response, anyone who follows my scholarship knows that I always make a distinction between the literary, historical, and archaeological records. I do, however, at times combine all three elements to see where they harmonize and where they differ to ascertain a reconstructed anthropological premise for the ethnogenesis and development of the culture. Strawman Argument number 16. Jabari's claim he will literally compact 50 to 100,000 years as if it's one story. You make the Hebrew people contemporary to Kemetic people, which is crazy because the Hebrew people were contemporary to Kemetic people. Wow. Shaka almost says no chronology. He never uses terms like I don't watch this stuff. I deal with knowledge. So you don't use terms like Iron Age 1, Iron Age 2, or terms like Bronze Age, and you don't speak about the overlapping periods and all the implication these things mean. And again, these are false assumptions and allegations because they are not familiar with my work. He says I compact history, which is crazy because he's only making this claim based on one video of mine that he saw and only one video of mine that he referenced, right? Which is crazy because that was not exemplifying my scholarship. That was me putting forth a lecture or a presentation to unite the Kemetic community and the Hebrew Israelite community so we can work together and we can resist our oppressor, right? Or the oppressive system that is suppressing us, right? So it's clear that if he saw my scholarship, which is encased in the Minority Report Part 1, which I did way back in 2015, he will see that's not how I deal with history, all right? This is simply untrue. Jabari has taken out of context the motive behind my lecture in 2014. My scholarly works do not reflect this. The Minority Report Part 1 is one example of that. Shaka already admitted his unfamiliarity with my work and dismissal of even considering it, which led him to blatantly misconstrue my perspective unapologetically, as we can see from that video. If you go to Minority Report Part 1, I deal with a section called chronology in 2 different areas. At 543, you'll see this table of contents right here, where I go into Stone Age prehistory, Middle Bronze Age, Late Bronze Age, Iron Age, modern archaeological reports, ancient paleographical continuum analysis, and biocraniometric and analysis reports. Now, does this sound like somebody that's a religious dogmatic zealot? No, it does not. This is somebody who actually deals with their culture objectively and can convey so in an academic format that can be well received for those who don't even subscribe to the culture. Obviously, they're not familiar with my work. Strawman Argument number 17, Jabari's claim the reason the scripts were similar is because they come from the same source. That's what you're missing. They got literacy from an African. Now, I'm not going to say they got literacy from an African, but what I will say is that in order for them to produce their Exodus script, they did extract some glyphs, right, from ancient Kemet, and then they used the glyphs that pertain to various elements in a culture, and they syntax these glyphs to create words, right, and to structure a language, so that way they can put their literature into it and have means of communicating with each other via letters and administrative communications, communication dealing with the king, communication dealing with various tribes, etc. So my response, I agree, according to the Medu-Neter and the Phoenician Palaeon Hebrew script. I even go into detail about it in my lecture called Was the Cipher and the Medu-Neter Necessary to Formulate the Ancient Hebrew Object? Also, did the Medu-Neter influence East Semitic cuneiform? This is what I want to know. Because apparently what he's saying is that, you know, the ancient Kemetic peoples taught literacy to everybody in the East, in the Near East. So I want to know, did they influence the East Semitic cuneiform? Because I don't see no cuneiform really showing, East Semitic cuneiform really showing up in ancient Kemet. Only when we look at the Amarna tablets do we find East Semitic cuneiform, but this is during the 14th century BCE. And this is way before the actual cuneiform system itself was even created. So did the Medu-Neter influence the East Semitic cuneiform? I would like to know that. And the one I'm talking about specifically is Akkadian. I would like for him to answer that for me, all right? Here's a reference to the video where I talk about the Sonic script is based on the Medu-Neter. And I start first with showing this transitional period happening at Wadi al-Hall. And then from Wadi al-Hall, I'll move on to other sites as well, going to Serbet el-Qadim, Timna Valley. And then I talk about some regions there like the Sarta, Izbet artifact, etc. Right? So Strawman Argument number 18, Jabari's claim when the Hyksos came to Egypt, and they did probably, what? So do you believe that the Hyksos actually came into Egypt, or you believe that that's a myth too? Okay. Are you insinuating that Hyksos may have never been in Kemet? If so, that is contradictory to the archaeological and historical record, although the Egyptians tried to excise them out of history, which we do know, and Egyptologists agree. And to your own book, see Strawman Argument number 5, where he talks about the Hyksos as if they're historical people, and their entrance and expulsion is historical, all right? And my video called ARCE, or the American Research Center in Egypt, 2016 conference, I interview a woman there who is doing a presentation for a PhD at this conference where all the world's renowned Egyptologists congregate to and give exclusive lectures that is really not, that's not published as of yet. And she talks about the Hyksos in that video. You can check that out, okay? Strawman Argument number 19, Jabari's claim he didn't regurgitate the concept they, Jews, were enslaved, okay? My response, I redefined the term enslavement in my lecture called the Minority Report Part 1, because this is a major misconception. And if you go here to the Minority Report Part 1, you can go to that time marker where I talk about enslavement and servitude, and where I say that the servitude and enslavement that the ancient Israelites had faced during that time was not the same that was experienced by African Americans in the Ma'afa here in the Americas under the white slave masters. It was not the same type of slavery, right? The Egyptians did not castrate people. The Egyptians did not lynch people. The Egyptians did not do these things that we see that was done to black people by white slave masters here in America, in the Ma'afa, all right? So our people have to understand that. When we see that, we have to study the culture to see what was their perception of being enslaved by the Egyptians, right? Working hard for an extended period of time, having to meet a quota. Sometimes they might have been beaten with a rod or attempted to get beaten with a rod, but after they finished their work, they will go to their section of where they lived, and they would be okay. They would have some degree of autonomy or freedom. And even working, they got some benefits from working as well. Even though their slave masters or taskmasters, I'm not gonna say slave, their taskmasters was hard on them, they still receive benefits for meeting quotas, okay? And again, you gotta study the culture to understand that. So I never say that the enslavement and or forced servitude of the ancient Israelites was the same exact thing as African Americans, right? Here in America, in the diaspora, in the Ma'afa, due to the transatlantic slave trade. All right. And if you watch my video here, you'll see I touch on that. Strawman Argument number 20. Devon should read my book, Jabari says. And he says, I don't have any copies of the book. Well, I did read his book, and I have a copy. And here it is right here. And I showed it to y'all in the beginning when I did the portion of the live stream. All right, let's move forward. Strawman Argument number 21. Jabari's claim. I heard other people say he's very familiar with our Kemetic text, but I don't see that. Again, he's drawing conclusions. Jabari doesn't see that because he's not thoroughly familiar with my work, nor has he had a chance to discuss that matter with me. I'm a student of Kemetic culture as well. Therefore, I'm still learning it while I share my findings. What we differ is he deals with it from a more priestly perspective, while I deal with it from a more archaeological perspective. And those people that follow me on Facebook, on YouTube, they know my angle in regards to dealing with Kemetic culture, all right? And if you watch this video here, DivineProspect and Dr. Reggie discuss language, script, and people. Me and Brother Reggie have a great bill where we talk about Kemetic culture, Israelite culture. I make references to several texts and things of that nature. And you can see I'm thoroughly familiar with the culture of ancient Kemet. I can't sit here and debate people, have discussion with people without entrenching myself unbiasedly into the culture that I am opposing, so that way I can understand the worldview that my opponent is trying to convey to me, all right? So I'm at argument number 22. Gerard's claim, if you read the Papyrus of Ani, or Ani, as he says, the Papyrus of Ani is basically a group of ceremonies. My response, are you positing that the ancient Egyptians did not believe in a literal eschatological afterlife journey through the Amduat to the field of the heavenly reeds, or the Aru, or the Aaru? And the Papyrus of Ani is currently held at the British Museum, and its provenance dates back to 1250 BCE during the 19th dynasty. It was compiled for the Theban scribe Ani in his tomb. All right, and I'll probably do a follow-up video when I explain or break down to you the mummification process and how Ani was able to get his hands on this Pre-colonial, because only the people who had the Pre-colonial, only the people that had the coffin text, only these people were allowed eternal life. Anybody that did not have these things, which would have been over 90% of the other population, of the other populace, they had no eternal life. Because you also had to read or be literate in order to recant these spells, okay, when you go to Amduat on the other world. All right, let's move forward. Strawman Argument number 23. Jabari's claim, he cites a book from a scholar that essentially renders Kemetic history into Abrahamic history. This author was used because the intent of my lecture in 2014 was to bring unity and harmony between the Hebrew Israelites and Kemetic community, hence my choice of reference. In no way did I pose the author to be an accredited PhD expert in the field and that he should be cited as such. I know the world's oldest book is the teaching of Pt.1. So obviously he got it twisted, but here's the book right here. You guys can go and grab this book online. It's called The Egyptian Mystery School of An or Anu, and it says Esoteric Atanuology, Egyptology, and Rastafariology, Volume 1, 2004 edition by George W. Singleton. It's a great read, but it's not an academic source. But it's a great read if you want to see similarities between the two cultures and understanding how to unify by looking for common denominators between those cultures. It's a great book. And I referenced it because I was talking about unity, not my scholarship, but unity. Right? Strawman Argument number 24. Jabari's claim, let me tell him three things. One, in order to be truly African, you have to recognize the divine feminine, which I do, right? And if you go back and watch my lecture, don't a closed mouth didn't get pled, you will see that, Mr. Jabari. Number two, he needs to understand that there were large swaths of history where no one else existed but the African. And what he's talking about is pre-Homo sapiens sapiens. That's what he's talking about. Then he says the final thing I want him to understand is that the text that he is reading is primarily myth. You have to re-Africanize your tradition in order to remain in it, and then we can rock. Otherwise, you're an enemy. Well, obviously, Jabari, you're not familiar with my work, because if you was, you would not make those statements. All right. Number one, I do watch my work as stated in Strawman Argument number 7. Number two, I agree with that. Hence why I mentioned my subscription to the reaching out of Africa model as opposed to the multi-regional continuity model. And what I mean when I say reaching out of Africa model, my subscription is that the initial Garden of Eden was from the Nile to the Tigris Euphrates. And my subscription is that from the Nile region area of it, that is where well, mankind was populated all over, but the actual garden itself was in that area, or that section where Adam and Eve was more so geared towards the Nile area. And from there, they expanded from the Nile area and they populated the rest of the earth. That's according to my disposition when looking through the worldview of the cultural literature, okay? And then I look in history, where not history, but I look in archaeology, where the common consensus model is that this out of Africa situation is where we have the spread of the Homo sapiens sapiens from the Homo sapiens idolatry from out of Africa. So when we see the earliest populations of people living on a planet, even Jericho goes back to 8000 BCE as a city. You know what I'm saying? Jericho, where the people in Kemet was towards the Nile, towards Napata. Okay. So now we see this is the region, the area where the earliest civilizations had existed. And in doing such, the rest of civilization spread from this region here, from the Tigris to the Euphrates. All right. So again, being that he watched that video in 2014 where I even talked about the recent out of Africa model, but it's evident that this guy does not really pay attention to my work, and he was just cherry picking, because if he did, he wouldn't have mentioned that. And I asked him, does he know the difference between the two? He didn't even comment on the fly, but he receded from speaking on it until we got further in our discussion, and he never picked up back on it. You know why? Because even though he wrote about it in his book, and I'm sure he's familiar with the model, he is going to be difficult for him to get one on somebody who knows equally as much as he does in regards to that particular subject matter. All right. Number 3, the text is a conglomeration of myth, legends, and history intertwined by a scribal priestly class with the objective of nationalistic unification under a common written social memory or history. This is what I teach in regards to the compilation of the Bible. So if he understood that, then we wouldn't really have a debate, an argument, but that's not what he was doing. He said the whole text is myth. Then he said, well, all of it's not myth. So there's some history in it. So Jabari, what parts of history and what parts of myth? You see, that's where the confusion gets in. And then when people say, oh, the whole Bible's myth. So I said, is Omni real? And is Jehu? Are these real people? Because we find them in Syrian release. Is Dawid real? Because we find it in the Moabite Stela. Are these people real? Or these are myths? Okay. All right. And then I brought up this article on showcasing the or juxtaposing between the multi-regional continuity model and the out of Africa model in regards to the scientific consensus in regards to early human migrations of the Homo sapiens sapiens and their population to the rest of the world. I wanted to get into discussion with him to see how much of it he understood, he was familiar with, and how much of it he can convey to see if your cultural paradigm that you have, the cultural paradigm, the cultural model that you subscribe to, does it speak on this? Does it line up with this general consensus in regards to anthropology, in regards to science? And what I did in my lecture in 2014, I said that the Bible actually speaks about this, and science is only verifying what we find in the text, whether it be myth, legends, or history, okay? Because again, myth can also be a way that a culture tells a story on how it perceives natural phenomenon that is not immediately known to the culture itself, right? And they attribute this to their patron deity and supernatural influences as bringing about this natural phenomenon, as opposed to their full understanding of the scientific elements or principles behind why these things are occurring, all right? So now that we got past that first section, hopefully y'all enjoyed it. I'm gonna take a quick water break. And now we're gonna get in. This leads us into the meat and potatoes that y'all didn't get to see at the debate that I'm gonna present for you guys right now. All right? Just give me 1 second. Yeah, all right. And this one is called 7 Little White Lies, Chapter 2, Ancient Africa Contributed Nothing to Civilization. So Jabari made several strawman arguments in his book, and he used these same strawman arguments against me at the debate, which is unfortunate because if the brother followed my work, he would see that I rebutted all of these things that he's saying. But let's move forward. Strawman Argument number 1 from chapter 2 of his book, and you guys can go get it on Amazon, all right? Jabari's claim all white people believe that blacks are the descendants of Ham. And if you look into his book, this section right here, it says, in folkloric tradition of the Abrahamic religions, Ham is identified as the dark southern peoples of the world. Look what he says. Ham is identified as the dark. That's very interesting because are you saying that Ham was cursed because he was black? Do you know how fallacious that sounds? Because if Ham was black, that means his brothers were also black, and his father was also black, and their wives were black, and Ham's mother was black. So you can't say he was cursed because he was black, or Canaan was cursed because he was black, because that's fallacious. Doesn't make any logical sense. All right, let's keep reading. He says, in fact, Christian plantation owners during the transatlantic enslavement trade used Ham's punishment and the curse of his son Canaan to justify African bondage. This is not totally true. And some scenarios, yes, that was used. You know why? Because a lot of the slaves did not have the Bible, could not read the Bible. Because if they could read the Bible, they would see that, even if we are Ham, the curse only fell upon Canaan. And if you're saying that we're the descendants of Canaan, then that means you're also implying that we could be the biblical Israelites or descendants of the ancient Israelites. So, of course, the slave master is not going to want the slave to really read, perceive, and understand the text as they did. Even if they subscribe to themselves as being as Ham, they'll see that the slave masters, being from the lineage of Japheth, had no right to have dominion over them, even according to the prophecy that we see in the text. He says, in fact, Christian plantation owners during the transatlantic enslavement trade used Ham's punishment and the curse of his son Canaan to justify African bondage. All right, so let's read further. My response: this is simply untrue. All right, and we're gonna go into my reference for that being untrue. All right. Now, a lot of people are familiar with the Zondervan Bible Dictionary. Okay, and I have all the information in regards to the copyright and everything like that, which is in 2008. Keep that date in mind. Okay. And then when we look at this section here, you know, a lot of people in the Hebrew Israelite community, they make a reference to this, right? But they don't really understand this, because if they understood it, they would not keep making a reference to this part of the book as pertaining to them. Because when they do, I'm going to show you how you put yourselves under the auspices of being a victim of white supremacy when you subscribe to what the Zondervan Bible Dictionary uses. So I hope after this presentation, my brothers and sisters in the Hebrew Israelite community, you do not make a reference anymore to the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, because these people were influenced by an earlier work that I'm about to show you, hence why they still have a form of white supremacy in this actual text right here. Let's read it, all right? Hebrew, Ham, pertain perhaps Hot, the youngest son of Noah, born probably 96 years before the flood, and one of the 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the blacks, or not the Negroes in some version. Keep that in mind. That is a racist statement, and it's a way to disenfranchise so-called African Americans or blacks or Negroes in the diaspora here in the Americas. Family, please do not reference this anymore after I break this down to you, so you can see what influenced them to still add that there, even in 2008. It came back from a much more ancient racist worldview, and I'm going to show you in a second. It says, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites, Genesis 10:6-20. His indecency when his father lay drunk brought a curse on Canaan, the descendants of Ham, and the passage Ham is used as another name for Egypt, as representing Ham's principal descendants, a city of the Zuzites east of the Jordan. All right, keep this in mind. This is very, very important, family. And if Brother Jabari understood what I'm about to show you guys, he would not have added anything in regards to Ham in his text. He wouldn't have put it in his book. But let's see where this racist remark about not the black come from. Because whenever you say, well, see there, it says not the black, so automatically this means Shem. But then when we go to Shem in the same Bible dictionary, it doesn't mention the blacks and Negroes. When we go to Japheth in the same Bible dictionary, it doesn't mention blacks and Negroes. So why doesn't it mention blacks and Negroes? And why did the authors of the Zondervan Bible Dictionary decided to purposely set apart blacks or Negroes from not being part from the lineage of Ham? They don't even mention them in Shem or Japheth. There's a racist reasoning for that. Let's get into it. Reference number 2. There's a book called The Negroid Beast, or In the Image of God, The Reasoning of the Age, The Revelator of the Century. The Bible as it is, the Negro and his relation to the human family. The Negro a beast, but created with articulate speech and hands, that he may be of service to his master, the white man. The Negro, not the son of Ham. Neither can it be proven by the Bible, and the argument of the theologian who would claim such melts to the mist before the thunderous and convincing arguments of this masterful book by Chas Carroll, who spent 15 years of his life and $20,000 in his compilation, published by American Book and Bible House, St. Louis, Missouri, 1900. So in 1900, when his book was published, it still influenced the Zondervan Bible Dictionary in 2008. So 108 years later, this racist reference here, this book, still influences how some white theologians view the descendants, or view the Negroes or the blacks here in America. And they had to do it because they understood that if they actually did descend from Ham or Shem, that their justification for subjugating them to slavery would be null and void. They couldn't do it. There's no biblical justification for it. And a lot of these were white Christians. Okay. So we read here in chapter 10, mind you, family, get this book. Please get this book. If you need it, let me know, and I will email it to you when I get a chance. Read the whole book, which I did. And I just put out this section. There's a lot of sections I could, but if you read this section in chapter 10, it says, the Bible and divine revelation, as well as reason, all teach that the Negro is not human. In AD in 1867, there appeared in the United States a work entitled The Negro, What is His Ethnological Status? By the Reverend B.H. Payne, who wrote under the nom de plume of Ariel. He asserted that the Negro is not the son of Ham, and that he was not a descendant of Adam and Eve, that he is simply a beast, and that he has no soul. So what they're saying about the Negro who they enslaved, right, the one that they brought here to America, that they're not related to Ham, and that they were an independent creation from Adam and Eve, and they were actually one of the beasts of the field. Wow, family. And look at these images here on the side, right? I don't need to read it. You can take a look at it. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and here's Adam and Eve here, right? And yet you see this black Negro baby here. He's a beast, right? He's not from Adam and Eve. This is what they're telling you. This is why they can enslave them, because mankind, meaning Adam and Eve and all the descendants, were giving the authority to subjugate the planet and all the inhabitants of it under their command. They had dominion over all the beasts of the field. And if the black African that they enslaved is considered a beast of the field, it justified them subduing them, enslaving them, and castrating them, beating them, and treating them the way that they did, family. This is mind-blowing. So my family who uses the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, you cannot use that book. Matter of fact, throw that book away. There's elements of white supremacy and racism still littered and replete throughout it, because it's designed to disenfranchise you and associate you back to being a beast of the field, which gives the white man authority to subjugate you and enslave you. Okay. And if Brother Jabari understood this, he wouldn't use this reference about Ham and Europeans seeing the black people from the lineage of Ham. Even though there was a small majority of them, or a good number of them that did, the overarching theologians did not believe that. And they were the ones that were teaching these white Christian slave owners. All right, let's move forward. The issue of Ham and Canaan, according to the biblical narrative. Pay attention to this, family, all right? And Bereshit 9:21, in Genesis 9:21, he, Noah, drank of the wine and became drunk and uncovered himself inside his tent. Right? Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it upon their shoulders, and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. And their faces were turned away, so they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine, he knew that what his youngest son had done to him. Right? So he said, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brothers. Now, there's a lot of theological interpretations of this text, but if we deal with it strictly from the literature, it says, Wayar Ham abi Kenanan it erwat abiu, right? And we're going to see, parsing it, what that says. So Wayar means, and he said, right? Ham, abi, which means father of Canaan, Canaan. It is a direct object marker that leads the subject, which is Ham, and what he said, directly to the last part of the verse, not the verse, excuse me, of the clause that deals with the revelation, or the unveiling of the nakedness of his father. And nakedness there, we're going to see, means his genital area. So, and he saw, but it's not really, and he saw when we properly render it, she says, and he spied on the nakedness or on the genital area of his father. He spied on it, right? And here, as you can see, is how I parsed it, and you guys can take a look there. So we have the wav as a conjunction, meaning then and or together. Excuse me. Then we have the yara, comes from the root ra'ah, which in this sense is the verb, cal, perfect tense, wav, consecutive, third person masculine singular, to see, to understand, to spy, reveal, look at, examine, inspect. Okay. Ham is a proper noun, singular, absolute. Abi is a common noun because Ab means father. E is a possessive contract meaning of. Canaan, which is Canaan, is a proper noun, singular, absolute. Et is the direct object marker, which is relating the subject directly to the object as being the subject having a direct relation or direct expression upon the object, even with those brackets there or with that insertion telling us who Ham was to Canaan. Okay, then we get to Erdwat, which is a feminine singular construct, common noun, which means nakedness or genital area. All right, Abi-u, Abi, okay, which means father of, but Ab, the root, is a common noun, singular construct, chief, progenitor, father, ancestor. And when we get the E-u at the end, comes from Hiu, which is a pronoun suffix, third person masculine singular, he, it, this, that, this same, right? So, and his father, right? Or and the father of Canaan, right? He saw his father's nakedness. Abi is the father of Abi-u, and his father's nakedness, which he saw, or which he spied on the genital area. So what was Ham's crime or Ham's crime? And remember, Noah could not curse Ham, which then by proxy would curse all of Ham's descendants, because the Most High blessed Ham in the previous chapter. He blessed all the sons of Noah. So Noah was not able to curse Ham for what he did. But in the culture, if you commit a sin, the iniquity of you will fall upon your son unless the son turns away from the father's iniquity and does righteously. Therefore, the iniquity is staved from him and he's good, right? But we're going to see what was Ham's crime. Voyeurism is the sexual interest in or practice of spying on people engaged in intimate behavior such as undressing, sexual activity, or other actions usually considered to be of private nature. And I remember, this narrative was written by Judean scribes, right, or Levite scribes. Levite scribes or Judean scribes or Levites who dwelt in Judea. They were the ones that recounted this oral tradition, social memory narrative, and they're the ones that placed it where it's at in the book of Genesis or Bereshit. Therefore, they're going to be speaking about this narrative from priestly or scribal terminology or jargon. Right, so when we see that word there, where it says Erwat, which is the genital area or the nakedness and the uncovering or the spying of such, we're going to understand that through looking at, guess what, the statute, laws, and commandments. Right. So Leviticus or Vayikra 18:7 says, the nakedness of your father or the nakedness of your mother you shall not uncover. She is your mother; you shall not uncover her nakedness. And then we look here in the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee lexicon and a Brown Driver Briggs lexicon. It also explains to you pudenda, and it also goes into shame, filthiness. But what we really want to deal with is pudenda, or the genital area directly. And we see other references to that in 1 Samuel 20 and 30, Leviticus 18:8 and 18:16, Leviticus 20:11, etc. So we know we're dealing with the genital area, family. So voyeurism was something when you practice it upon your father, right? It says the nakedness of your father, the nakedness of your mother, you shall not uncover. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You should not spy or be a voyeur looking at her extremities, her private extremities, because when you do so, you have dishonored or disgraced your mother and your father. All right. Now, some people also interpret this to mean a sexual violation as well. And this some theologians actually render that as such. But giving it plainly from how I'm reading and extracting it from the text, voyeurism is the crime. But look at this, family. Look at this. Here's the thing. I'm going to show you the next slide. The question is, if Canaan was cursed because of what his father Ham did, then that means that the Most High will visit the iniquity up to the third and fourth generation unless the descendants of that perpetrator turn from the wickedness or turn from the curse of their father or the iniquity or lifestyle that is uncomely to the Most High. And if they turn from it and do what is right, then the Most High will not visit or will not judge them for their father's iniquity. Okay, so this is very important because we have to see, was Canaan given an opportunity to turn away from his father's iniquity or bearing the curse? Was he given an opportunity? And we read this article, let's see it. Scholars owe new Dead Sea Scrolls reading to Google. Why was Canaan really exiled? From Haaretz 6/2013. Professor Elisha Qimron had been working on the final stages of the second volume of the new edition of the Hebrew writings of the Dead Sea Scrolls, when a particular fragment of a Dead Sea Scroll had been posted on the joint website of Google and the Israel Antiquities Authority, the Leon Levy Dead Sea Scrolls digital library website. The website features very high resolution photographs of the Dead Sea Scrolls using a special camera, which not only records the condition the actual scrolls help preserve them, but also brings to light for the first time faded and hidden letters. The fragment found in K4 at Qumran measures a paltry 7 by 10 centimeters and is very poorly preserved. However, one look at the new photograph of the fragment on the site was enough for Qimron to put off publication of the volume to try and decipher the text. Qimron sent the photograph to Hanan Ariel and Alexei Yuditsky, two of his assistants on the Hebrew Historical Dictionary project he had helped head for the Hebrew Language Academy. He said he wanted each of us to read it independently. We each read the letters this differently, but after negotiation, we agreed on a wording. After we stopped debating and agreed, we immediately understood what was written. Pay attention to this, family. The three scholars found the word El, God, written in 10 of the lines in a slightly different font than the usual, which is common in ancient writings. The name Noah, Japheth, and 10 of Shem, one of Ham's brothers, clearly indicated this text had to do with Genesis 9. Pay attention. The word El appears close to the phrase tent of Shem and might indicate that the intent was to Hashem as a synonym for El. By comparing the text with another of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the scholars have come up with another interpretation. The scholars believe that the word tent can be interpreted as land, and that the text may mean that Hashem or Elohim lives in the land of Shem. Wow, that's a deep if you interpret it that way. But keep following. Thus, Canaan invaded a land. Look, Canaan invaded a land that was not his. And that was the reason his descendants were exiled, not because of his father's sin. The interpretation is also known from the apocryphal book of Jubilees, which survived in the Ethiopian sacred language of Ge'ez and in Greek, or Koine Greek. There, it also states that Canaan's sin was in taking the land in a manner different than the way Noah had intended to divide it, ignoring his brother's warnings to do so. Whoever wrote this text knew this interpretation from the book of Jubilees, Ariel said. The conclusion is that this alternative tradition to the biblical version was common in Judean desert in the Second Temple times and later disappeared. The earliest compilation of biblical manuscripts that we have of the Tanakh is the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the understanding of them, they knew that even though Ham had sinned, they know that the iniquity that fell upon Canaan, Canaan had an opportunity to redeem himself of the visitation of the iniquity of his father if he adhered and hearkened to the directive that was given to him for him to go and claim another portion of land that was inherently his. But Canaan decided not to do that. He was stubborn and stiff-necked and decided to claim land that was not given or appropriated to him or proportioned to him. And this goes to show that this is the reason why the Canaanites had to be removed out of the land, because they initially, according to the biblical narrative, did not have rights to claim that property or that estate. So this goes to show this, when you look at history, when you look at modern archaeology, textual criticism, you get a bigger worldview on what is going on. But my opponent obviously is not aware of any of this. He cannot break any of this down. He is not familiar with any of this. And this explains why he has a lack of knowledge in regards to Ham. And I hope this cleared it up for a lot of you, family. Let's move forward. Right? 7 White Lies, chapter 4. Hebrew slaves built the pyramids, right? We're going to deal with some more strawman arguments that's made. Strawman argument number 1. Jabari's claim Christians and Jews believe that the Hebrews built the pyramids. Did a coerced Hebrew labor force build Kemetic cities and not pyramids? And then here's the excerpt from his book. I'm just going to read the highlighted areas so you guys can read the rest of it at your leisure. Situating Hebrew enslavement as cities named Pithom and Ramses is burdened with the same problem that some scholars and historians encounter when they attempt to find literal historicity in many other sections of the Bible. They begin their endeavor by assuming that the biblical story is an historical event and that they forcibly shoehorn it into actual events while ignoring rampant inconsistencies and contradictions. Okay. Naval's excavations in the modern city of Tel el-Mashkuta might have discovered the city, which might have been called Pi-Atum or Per-Atum or House of Atum, which they say is Pithom, and the ancient Kemetic language, okay? And he's saying this refers to supply depots which would allow the Kemetic army to gather important provisions prior to foreign excursions. And I'm gonna get into that later so you guys can understand geography and certain key points that was crucial in regards to naval strategies of the ancient Kemetic peoples, all right? This is why naval acknowledges the supposed importance of discovering buildings which might have been used as store houses, probably similar to silos. Now, we're going to see the fallacy in him identifying Tel el-Mashkuta as Pithom or Per-Atum. Now, being that Jabari subscribes to that, he's going to place the Exodus narrative or force it to be placed during the Ramside time period or the Ramside dynasty, which is error, okay? And I'm going to show that through the rest of this presentation, all right? Now, my response, the Tanakh never says that the Hebrews built the pyramids. It doesn't. But instead, storage city silos at Pi-Ramesu or Pi-Ramses, which is Tel el-Daba or the northern district of Avaris, and Pithom, which is actually Tel el-Retaba. Not what he's talking about, because Tel el-Retaba predates Tel el-Mashkuta and the silos there, because Tel el-Retaba goes back to the 18th dynasty, where we have Tel el-Mashkuta goes to the 19th dynasty. And we're gonna see this. We're gonna see this, right, in the Eastern Delta. However, we have records that Semites, along with native Egyptians and Nubians, did assist in building pyramids near Al-Lahun and elaborate tombs in the Valley of the Kings by way of Deir el-Medina. I can't make these claims unless I have the evidence to show you, family, and that is exactly what I'm going to do. Right now, the Minority Report Part 1 at the 5715 marker. You can go back and check that out because I touch on it there. And Deir el-Medina is an ancient Egyptian village which was home to the artisans who worked on the tombs in the Valley of the Kings during the 18th to 20th dynasties of the New Kingdom period. The settlement's ancient name was Set Ma'at, translated as the place of truth, and the workmen who lived there were called servants in the place of truth. That's the Deir el-Medina, which is a site of middle-class artisans who worked on the tombs at the Valley of the Kings, all right? But we also have at Al-Lahun, we have Nubians, we have Libyans, Syrians, Egyptians, all working together, building the pyramids in the Middle Kingdom near the Faiyum Basin and where the Bar Yosef Canal was at. They were there building that canal and also building the pyramids for Middle Kingdom Nasut or kings. So Semites did assist with building it, but we're going to keep moving forward. Here's an article you guys can read at your own leisure. It's called I titled it Pi-Ramesu or the Northern District of Avaris, Tel el-Daba, and you can read this for yourself at your own time. You can pause this and read it. But I'm gonna move forward. But I want to read this highlighted part right here, very important. It says, after the conquest of Avaris by Amos, circa 1530 BC, the major part of the town was abandoned. The major part of the town was abandoned. The citadel, however, was destroyed and enormous storage facilities were set up, among them numerous silos. So when Amos came and he ran out the in 1530 BC, he ran out the Hyksos, a major part of the town was abandoned, but all of the town was not abandoned. And we see this also in the various strata as well. And I'm going to touch on some of that as we move forward. The citadel, however, was destroyed and enormous storage facilities were set up, among them numerous silos. On top of those remain traces of camp with bonfires, ovens, post holes of tents were encountered. That means people were living there working on these silos. Bodies, probably of soldiers, were buried without any offerings in pits. Also, bodies of several horses was found in this stratum. And we're going to see why that's the case, because this was a pivotal naval site that was necessary for the Egyptians to use in their excursions in the Mediterranean in the Levant region. But again, I'm showing this because this dates back to the 18th dynasty. The 17th dynasty was Amos, but then later on the 18th dynasty, and we're going to see why I'm making a reference to the 18th dynasty. Actually, it says later the ruins of the Thutmose period were covered by a fortress of Horemheb, a time when Peru Nefer was in need for building up military measures against new military power, the Hittites. All right. And let's go down here. It says the palatial princess which covered the area was surrounded by an enclosure wall with an entrance pylon in the north, together with the town in the south and the bay at the river in the north. It can most probably be identified with Peru Nefer, the major Egyptian naval and military stronghold. Keep that in mind. The palace, which dates precisely from Thutmose III and Amenhotep II, the time when Peru-Nefer was active, the presence of Nubian soldiers as evidenced by Kerma pottery and Kerma arrow tips, as well as workshops producing arrows and slingshots, proves the presence of military units. So we see not only do we have the Nubians that were used there, because Nubians were from what's called Taseti, or the land of the bowmen, or the land of the bow. That's what the Magi archers were known for. Not only were they there to help substantiate that this was a military base, but there were also other Semites that lived amongst them, and they were assisting with, guess what? Building these storage silos during the Thutmose dynasty. Okay, we're going to see why Thutmose III, and even more importantly, Amenhotep II is very important to what I'm about to show you, right? There's another article called The Topography of the New Kingdom of Varus and Per-Ramses by Manfred Bietek and Irene Foster Muller, and you guys can read this article in your own time. But I'm going to focus here on the highlighted part, which says, after the conquest of Varus by Amos, the town was first abandoned, except for the precinct of the Temple of Seth, where an unbroken activity till the Amarna period can be observed. Interesting. Unbroken activity? It says this temple, and look at this, up to the Amarna period, and that's going to all come into play when I move forward. This temple seems never to have been abandoned. Along the banks of the Nile, south of its bifurcation at the village of Esbet Helmi, enormous silo installations and a large magazine of the early 18th dynasty were erected. Again, we're going to see why I'm dealing with the 18th dynasty and these storage silos, because I'm placing this exodus somewhere, and hopefully y'all can still follow me, all right? So I'm looking on time. So far I'm doing okay on time. It should hopefully take another hour. All right, family, thank you for hanging in there. Let's move forward. All right, the Minoan presence in the pharaonic naval base of Peru-Nefer. Remember when I read the Jabari's book where he talked about these military outposts that were stationed in these this region of Pi-Ramses or Varus, and in this other storage silo city that he mentioned? There's a reason why that naval base was there, and it had to do was it allowed them again to sail from the south or the upper part of the Nile down towards the Nile Delta, and upon arrival there at Avaris, which then became Pi-Ramses because the capital was moved there by Ramses later on. But prior to Ramses, during the Thutmose dynasty, it was a pharaonic naval base where it was a military outpost, and there were all the Semites that still lived there. That was a system of building these storage silos that when they sailed there, they would stock up on grain and troops and weaponry, and then they would sail from there out of the eastern delta into the Mediterranean towards the Mediterranean part of the Levant, which is the coastal plains, and then they would come on there and they would fight various battles and also use it to sail up further when they was buffering the Hittites. And we're going to see that later on during the period of Ramses II when he had the Battle of Kadesh. Okay, let's move forward. Now, if you want to look at more data in regards to the site of Avaris, you want to look at this article called Avaris, the capital of the Hyksos, recent excavation of Tel El Daba by Manfred Bietek. And the thing that's most important is going to section 10, which is on page 67, because it talks about the citadel of the early 18th dynasty. And remember, this was after the Hyksos left, and it shows you the archaeological evidence via these excavations that show you the activity in that area and the storage silos. This is gold, family. Let's move forward. Okay. Now, Pithom, the real Pithom, is Tel El Rataba, right? Because Tel El Rataba dates back to the 18th dynasty, right? Tel El Rataba was not in use during the Ramesside dynasty, right? It was moved from this location to Tel El Mashkuta, which I mentioned earlier. And the reason why he has to latch onto Tel El Mashkuta is because it places the storyline, right, that we read during the Ramesside period where you see little to no evidence of an exodus, right? So family, do not be misled. Look at the archaeological information and judge for yourselves, okay? Now, you can read this article again, pause it and read it on your own, but I'm going to read the highlighted parts, right? It says 18th dynasty silos and huts, right? The earliest archaeological confirmed occupation of the site is dated to the Second Intermediate Period. The American mission working in 1977-1981 at Tel El Rataba reached a layer datable to this period at the very bottom of 7 meter deep trial trench dug from the very top of the Tel. The oldest remnant so far discovered by the Polish-Slovak mission referred to the early 18th dynasty and consists of a relatively large silo constructed of mud bricks. That's very important, family, because the Hebrew Israelites built 4-room mud brick houses. And that's what we see there in the vicinity, which shows us there were still Semites that was living there in that area. Only a small section of this layer has been excavated inside a trench, approximately 5 meters below ground level. And until more of the context is investigated, it cannot be said whether the silo belonged to a private estate house or was rather a government-built facility, which was part of the first fortress, which I lean more towards. The diameter and matter of construction, very thin walls built of bricks standing on their longest sides, places the Rataba silo among other structures of the kind at Tel Hebua, which are apparently part of a government organized structure dated to the Second Intermediate Period. However, not the New Kingdom, showing the provenance is much earlier. While there is no archaeological evidence to suggest the existence of an 18th dynasty fortress at Tel Deir, there's an inscription confirming the existence of a fortress at Tel Jeku. Now, again, we're talking about the fortress, and that is also very interesting because when you look at the Minoan frescoes, we'll see that at that Pharaonic naval base, there was actually a citadel or a site that was there that was used by the Thutmose dynasty, more particularly Thutmose III. And we're going to get into that as we move forward. Again, as you can see, this is the references that I use in order to reconstruct corrective history. Of course, Jabari don't want to have these type of discussions because he's not familiar with this type of data. Now, why am I bringing up the Brooklyn papyrus? You're going to see as I move forward, all right? The historical papyrus in 5 pieces. I pulled this directly from the Brooklyn Museum website. And if you read what I have there highlighted, it says, and look at even the micro features is there, the pictures that they took of the actual manuscripts itself. The most important text recounts the efforts of a 13th dynasty Theban noblewoman named Seneb Tisi to establish legal ownership of 95 household servants whose names indicate that 45 were of Asiatic origin. The presence of so many foreigners in a single household suggests that the Asiatic population was increasing rapidly in the 13th dynasty Egypt. This is very important, family, as we move forward. Look at this. This is an article from UCLA in the Encyclopedia of Egyptology. It's a peer-reviewed article because those are the articles that I deal with. The title of it is Slavery and Servitude. All right, y'all can read the abstract for yourselves, but I'm only going to read the highlighted parts. It says an even more decisive sign of social change in the contemporary emergence of the term that Egyptologists most frequently translate with slave or home or laborer, i.e. laborer. In one of its first appearances, this word is accompanied by the determinative of a seated man or woman holding a club, which is nothing else than the phonogram of the word home. This determinative is him. This determinative is similar to the one sometimes used with the word servant, all right, ba'ak or bak, and dependent, meritjet, or with ethnonyms such as Nubians or Asiatics, who according to the royal decrees were granted a different status from Egyptians. A proof of social evolution described here is given by the pyramid text, the first corpus of Egyptian theology. What is this saying, family? That means the word slave or laborer became synonymous with words or it became an ethnonym for Asiatics. Wow, that's deep. That's really deep. Let's keep reading. An administrative text from the Middle Kingdom, coerced workforces consisted of conscripts, fugitives, and royal laborers. The first two terms refer to soldiers and field workers conscripted to serve in the army or to labor in state building projects. What did we see there at Tel El Rataba and at Pi Ramses, which is the northern district of Varis, where the Thutmose Pharaonic naval base was at? Government sanctioned building projects. Okay. It says conscripted to serve in the army or to labor in state building projects or agriculture. The most abundant documentation is offered by the Reisner Papyrus and by the El-Lahum Papyri, which mentions lists of prisoners being employed in state enterprises. Prisoners. The administrative text of the Papyrus Brooklyn displays them as subject to temporary coerced work on arable state land. Wow. This ties us back to what we read in the book in Papyrus. Let's move forward. Interestingly enough, it is not laborers or slaves that are treated as offenders of state service, but their masters, i.e. members of middle class. The Brooklyn Papyrus also provides information about royal laborers whose feminine equivalent is home mewet, without royal attribution. Unlike privately owned ba'aku, royal laborers, and u at the end is plural, and the mejuneture, and et is a feminine suffix, right? Royal laborers were state-owned slaves who shared the status of Asiatics reduced to slavery as a result of military campaigns or trade. So you're saying that when these Nasuts made military campaigns and took captives back, what you can see on war release with these captives tied up, they forced them into labor to build state-sponsored projects such as buildings, edifices, military outposts, pyramids, tombs. Wow, interesting. They could be entrusted to individuals as property. So once they took them, they entrusted it to middle-class people who then would oversee them and then would loan them out to work on state-sponsored projects. Almost always after trying to escape. Although nominally belonging to the king, recaptured fugitives like Asiatic slaves were assigned to the custody of a master who could give them away or leave them to his children. Wow. We find royal laborers employed as field workers, house servants, and cobblers, female laborers as hairdressers, gardeners, and weavers. This also applies to their Asiatic counterparts who are distinguished by the fact that their names, even if Egyptian, bore an ethnic qualification. The Asiatic Aduna and her son Anku. Both their number and their hereditary status suggest that the position of royal laborers were comparable to that of Asiatic slaves. Of the 79 servants presented in the list of the verso of the Brooklyn Papyrus as belonging to a single owner, at least 33 were Egyptians. Coerced foreign labor and the army were needed to deal with the growing expenses of an impressive military apparatus. The biological text from the tomb of General Amos, son of Abana of El-Kab, provides a picture of the status of foreign slaves during the first part of the New Kingdom. Boasting more than once that the king had allowed him to treat as slaves the Asiatics he had captured as spoils of war. And this continued on through the Thutmose dynasty, Thutmose III, Amenhotep II, etc., even there in Navaris. Okay, let's move forward, family. People given as reward are still referred to with Middle Kingdom terms such as heads or people. The nows of Thutmose III define foreign prisoners of war as men in captivity. Whoa! And employ the term marriage dependent to refer to people serving in temples or households, including foreign captives. The official Minmos received 150 dependents from the king as a reward for having contributed to the foundation of numerous temples. The shift in the status of local workforce is an evident sign of an overall evolution of Egyptian social fabric as a result of foreign involvement during the late Dynasty 18. Military and commercial activity brought many Asiatics to Egypt, either as booty or slaves brought into the slave markets. This is also shown by the branding of war prisoners. And it shows you an example is provided by the Sea People scenes in Medinet Habu and of soldiers in general, okay? During the late Bronze Age, Egypt was the main purchaser of slaves in the Mediterranean market, probably controlled by Asiatic Bedouins. So other Asiatics were selling other Asiatics to the Egyptians who would bring them to the slave markets. We remember the biblical tale of Joseph being sold to Ishmaelite traders, right, on their way to Egypt, which finds a documentary counterpart in a captain's sale of foreign slaves. Family, I don't really need to go in no more in regards to these Asiatics or these Semites being slaves under the control of the government of ancient Kemet at the time. And my focus is more particularly to Dynasty 18. Y'all can read the rest of this if you want. But this right here is evidence from the UCLA Encyclopedia of Egyptology, where they're making references to very primaries and deriving this conclusion. Okay. Let's read this from K.A. Kitchen. Kenneth Anderson Kitchen is a British Bible scholar, ancient Eastern historian, and personal, and Brunner Professor Emeritus of Egyptology and honorary research fellow at the School of Archaeology, Classics of Egyptology, University of Liverpool, England. He is one of the leading experts on the Egyptian Third Intermediate Period, having written over 250 books and journal articles on this and other subjects since the 1950s. He has been described by the Times as the very architect of Egyptian chronology. All my sources are authentic when I mention stuff, family. I don't play games with this, all right? Let me take a water break. Y'all can read this. I'm taking my water break. All right? Now, this is an article called From the Brickfields of Egypt by K.A. Kitchen. Let's read the highlighted parts. In early Hebrew tradition, one of the most evocative and familiar topoi for us moderners heard in childhood and studied later is that of the hapless Hebrew slaves toiling in the brick fields brick fields. Remember those mud brick houses? Okay. Brick fields of the Egyptian East Delta under the lash of Pharaoh's taskmasters. Much is made of the date, the route, the historical and theological significance of the oppression and exodus, and rightly so, but little more than a glance is usually spared for details of those toils preceding the exodus that was so painfully etched in the Hebrews' memories. The subject is hardly a burning issue, but is perhaps not unworthy of some modest attention based on first-hand material, either quite new or long available but much neglected. Let's keep reading. 3 centuries later, the new kingdom or empire period in Egypt's history comes much closer in the time of the saga of oppression and exodus. Long famous has been the unique painted scene of an Egyptian brickyard depicted in lively fashion in a rock-cut tomb chapel of the Theban vizier Rekhmire. A mixed group of workers, Syrians or Semites, Nubians and Egyptians, draw large jarfuls of water from a pool, mix water and clay with their hoes, and mold or strike row upon row of bricks with their hollow rectangular brick mold. One man measures off a pile of bricks with his hoe, while others carry off yoke loads of dry bricks to the building site, shown as a structure reached by a sloping ramp. Among the men, Egyptian overseers, each armed with a slim baton, sit or stole, keeping vigil over the work in progress. While the number of people depicted may simply be adventitious, there seem to be 9 or 10 men per overseer. And this scene, it is the presence of foreigners from the Levant, like the Hebrews, that has so often attracted attention, especially as the setting is not the Delta, but some hundreds of miles south at Thebes in the vast Karnak temple precinct of the god Amun. So when we look into the Theban vizier Rekhmire's tomb from 1450 BCE, keep in mind 1450 BCE, we have insight on how some building projects was done, right? How we had taskmasters that had slim batons in their hands, and how they was telling people you had to meet a particular quota. When you read this article, which is a great article, you'll see the quotas that the Nasuts had placed upon these taskmasters, viziers, or overseers, right? When they didn't put managers to manage various of the peoples that was amongst them, whether those were native workers, slaves from the slave market, right? And they forced them to work. They had to meet a quota. And if things happened, they increased the quota. If the time was short, and they put them to work. So this is insight that we can utilize to envision how other work projects was done all throughout the 42 knowns of ancient Kemet. All right, let's move forward. So the cultural literature based on the evidence that we just see, because, you know, people say the Bible's fiction, it's myth, it's not real. So we're going to see if all those pieces of evidence that I showed you guys is the cultural literature based on the evidence. Let's see. All right. Shemot 1:7, or Exodus 1:7. But the sons of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied, which we saw earlier from the evidence. So that the land was filled with them, again, which we saw from the evidence. And that populace was also increased by slave captives from slave markets that were brought into the region where these native Semites lived in the Delta region and other areas of Kemet. Now a new king arose over Kemet, or Mizraim, who did not know Yosef, or when it says did not know Yosef, did not know the lineage or the descendants of Yosef. He said to his people, behold, the people of the sons of Israel are more than we. Come, let us deal wisely with them, or else they will multiply. In the event of war, they will also join themselves to those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land. Slow down. Who was the enemies? Who was the enemies who they were concerned in regards to the event of war? The Hyksos. The Hyksos was driven out. And what the Amos did was he set up shop there in Avaris. And then the later Moses dynasty came in, also set up shop, build a naval base, build military outposts, etc. And they said, listen, these people are expanding. They're getting large and greater because of the Baruch, or the blessing that was upon them according to the cultural literature in the book of Bereshit that was upon Abraham and his descendants, that they will multiply. That's what the covenant that El Shaddai had with Abraham, and Shaddai has to do with providing sustenance, or the substance provider of El, right? That was an epithet of his, because the multiplication or the increase was the covenant that was made with Abraham. So now we see it playing out in history as well as in the rest of the cultural literature. But they were saying they was afraid that they will multiply, and in the event of war, they will also join themselves to those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land. The ones who hated the native Egyptians were the Hyksos. They was afraid that if they grew so big that they will go and join the Hyksos and retaking over Avaris or the rest of Egypt. So it says, so they appointed taskmasters over them to afflict them with hard labor, which we saw evidence of, and they built for Pera'ah or Pera'ah in the Medunetia, or Pera'ah in the Hebrew, or Pharaoh, which comes from the Greek rendering that we have in the English. Storage cities, Pithom and Ramesu or Ramses, which we saw the evidence for. Pithom being Tel El Rataba, and Ramses being Pi Ramses, or the northern district of Avaris. It wasn't called Pi Ramses during the time of their settlement there. It was called Avaris, or the northern district of Avaris, but then later on it became Pi Ramses, right, which would be an anachronism. And it says, and they made their lives bitter with hard labor and mortar and bricks and all kinds of labor in the field, all their labors which they rigorously imposed on them. So Elohim was good to the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very mighty. So when we see mortar and bricks, that's exactly what we see from the archaeological record. So again, the cultural literature is based on the evidence. This is not a myth. This is not fiction. The evidence substantiates the cultural literature, lets you know that the scribes were deriving this from actual history. Okay, that we were able to discover via archaeological excavations. All right. Exodus 2:5 says, then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the Nile, and her maidens walking alongside the Nile, and she saw the basket among the reeds, and sent her maid, and she brought it to her. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call a nurse for you among the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? Why am I showing this? Because remember, we saw the Brooklyn Papyrus, and we saw these Asiatic servants that was under these Egyptian peoples, and then we read the rest of the evidence that said that during the military campaigns, these Semites would be taken as booty or spoils of war, and then they would be given over or sold or loaned to middle-class people to watch over them, and that they would be in their harem. This is evidence here. We see that the biblical text is actually deriving it from the archaeological evidence, right? And here is the relief, right, that we spoke about earlier from the tomb of Breckmeyer, who was the mayor of Thebes and the vizier of Thutmose III, 1450 BCE. Keep this date in mind, family, so you can see this is an example of building projects all throughout the Nile. And it says he was the vizier under Thutmose III, which will place us in the 18th dynasty. And again, since we have an insight into how building projects was done, this can let us know that more than likely a similar scene was occurring in Avaris, right, and in Pithom, where these storage silos were created, so that way the army or the military of the Nasut can restock before going into war, right, which is whether by sea or by land. Okay, family, let's move forward. Strawman argument number 2. Jabari's claim, could low-skilled, unvalued, enslaved labor have constructed one of the world's most complex buildings? Could this sort of labor have been done by a coerced labor force or by highly skilled, well-compensated workers? So Jabari's claim is that all the building projects that was done all throughout Kemet was done by highly skilled, well-compensated workers. He's not considering that coerced labor force of low-skilled, unvalued workers will also use. And we saw some of that from the evidence I presented earlier, but let me give you some more evidence. My response, with the help of others, yes. Look at this reference. It's called An Introduction to the Archaeology of Ancient Egypt by Catherine A. Bard, whose credentials is phenomenal, all right? You guys can see it. You can read it on your own time. I'm going to read the highlighted part. Linder has calculated the Great Pyramid could have been constructed with 2 work crews, each with 2,000 workers for quarrying, hauling, and setting the stones. More workers were needed to construct the ramp. These unskilled workers would have been conscripted from the peasant farmer class. Okay. Carpenters, metal workers, potters, rope makers, and other specialists were also needed to make the tools and supplies used by the construction workers. Bakers and brewers working at Hayt el-Ghurab site that Linder is excavating at Giza would have provided food and drink for the workers, who was also needed to be supplied with clothes and possibly sandals. Additionally, architects, builders, and skilled artisans were probably permanently employed by the king. A total of 20 to 25,000 skilled and unskilled workers may have made up the entire pyramid workforce. If the workers' families were also there, possibly as many as 150,000 people were living at Giza, a huge city that probably sprawled over a very large area. Okay, family. Okay. That obliterates his argument. I'm gonna pause for 1 second. Okay. All right, let's move forward. All right, here we go. Semites among the workmen at Deir el-Medina. Remember I tell you, Deir el-Medina was the site where we had people that were working on the pyramids and the tombs that was by the Bar Yosef Canal in the Faiyum Basin area, okay? And this book is called Enemies of Civilization, Attitudes Towards Foreigners in Ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and China by Mu Chao Pu. And I suggest everybody go get this book. It's an excellent book. Excuse me for 1 second. Let me get some water. It says here, names of Hittites, Hurrian, Semitic, Libyan, and Nubian origins are identified at the workmen's village at Deir el-Medina. Although these were mostly low-level craftsmen, they were at least treated as the equals of their Egyptian colleagues. Moreover, foreigners in the greater Theban area, remember we talked about the Theban area, Rekhmire, the tomb of Rekhmire, who was a vizier and the Theban province under Thutmose III, often occupied more important positions such as the Asiatic chief of craftsmen, Taweti. A scribe of the vizier, for another example, was a certain Zabu of Semitic origin. What? A scribe of the vizier, for another example, was a certain Zabu of Semitic origin. And we had an Asiatic who was one of the chief craftsmen. Very interesting, family. Very interesting. I wonder if he's familiar with this. Anyway, Strawman Argument number 3. The Barbers claimed 600,000 men, 2.5 million, including women and children, left out of Egypt and wandered on the Sinai Peninsula. If anybody believes this anymore, they do not understand archaeology, history, and even they're not properly interpreting the biblical text or translating the biblical text properly. All right. Now, my response is the fallacy based on a misinterpretation of Exodus 12:37. I did an entire lecture on this Oh, why was that muted? Can y'all hear me now? Let me know if y'all can hear me now in the chat. Can y'all hear me now? Let me know if y'all can hear me. If y'all still in the chat, let me know if y'all can hear me. Okay. All right. Can somebody tell me where I left off? I got to start the recording again. Can somebody tell me where I left off? Wow, there's a lot of people in here. Deir, el-Medina, Canaanites were illiterate. What? Deir, el-Medina. Okay, I don't know what happened. Apparently the mic went mute. Hittites. All right, I need somebody to tell me exactly where I left off, if somebody can. Somebody let me know. Please, family, there's almost 100 of y'all in here. Just let me know where it cut off. Somebody says, I believe that 600,000, you were going into the number of the people who left Egypt. Okay, so y'all heard, okay. So y'all heard up until the Exodus, the amount of people that left out of Exodus. All right, excellent. All right, thank you, family, for that. I apologize for that technical difficulty. I have no clue what happened, but I'm glad I was alerted of this so I can fix it. All right, so now I'm gonna go back in. Somebody said craftsman. I don't, so it looks like the consensus is Strawman number 3 claim. So that means some people are taking notes, I see. So head craftsman, okay, so I'm gonna go from the head craftsman into the, from the enemies of Egypt. I'm gonna go from there into the how many people actually exited out of Egypt. All right, so thank you for that, family. Let me see where I'm at on my presentation. Okay, so what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna split this up, right? So I'm just gonna, tonight, I'm just gonna finish one part of it, and then the second half of the presentation, which is the heritage and the solution, I'm gonna do in a separate live stream and do a separate official video for it, and then I'm gonna syntax it together into one official video when I release it, all right? Okay, got it. It cut off at the Jabari saying, okay, so before I proceed, family, because I know it's getting real late, I should be able to finish at least the first half of it tonight. Let me know what y'all think so far. Please let me know if it was good. Let me know if y'all liked it. Give me a thumbs up, a fire emoji, you know, something. Let me know if y'all enjoyed it, if it was good so far, and then I'll proceed. Let me make sure y'all paying attention. There's almost 100 of y'all in here at 2:30 in the morning on Monday. Come on, family, interface with me. Let me know. Are you enjoying it? It's good, very informative. On point as always, Flames. I told you I strive not to let y'all down. Excellent, Flames. Okay, great. Okay, awesome. All right, good, good. I hope y'all enjoying this. And now this is some ammunition for you guys to use when you want to showcase appropriate scholarship to defend your worldview, right? So he called me a Hebrew apologist, so I'm gonna own that name, and I'm gonna give you all this work. All right. So let me go back to the presentation. So just give me 1 second. Let me just drink some water. All right. Yeah, all new info. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm just, and I have more information, family. Again, remember, the Minority Report is almost 900 slides, and I had to take out almost 500 of it because it was just too much. And some of the information I'm giving you are only bits and pieces or rats and tatters from the Minority Report. There's way more data that I have than what I'm showing you guys, man. I'm telling you, it's crazy. It's really crazy, all right? All right, so let's get back into this. I'm glad y'all can hear me. So give me 1 second. Let me transition. All right. Turn the camera off for 1 second. And let's do part 2. Let me see. Recording. Okay, good, good. All right, recording is looking good. We got enough space. All right, let's do our second part. All right, family, we're about to get started. Let me finish this up. Okay. All right, let's get started. Okay. All right. So when we're looking here, it says, moreover, foreigners in the greater Theban area often occupy more important positions, such as the Asiatic chief of craftsmen, Teweti, a scribe of the vizier. For another example, was a certain Zabu of Semitic origin. In fact, Apar-el, a vizier under Amenhotep III, who had a tomb in Saqqara, was identified as a Nubian. Then you have Hurrians. You have all these people that was mingled up there at Deir, el-Medina, and most of these people were low-level craftsmen, including Semites or Asiatics. But if you read his book, he says it wasn't possible to have all these elaborate things built by low-level craftsmen or peasants. Well, the evidence says otherwise. I'm trying to figure out ways to get in the sources from, but maybe that's me. I digress. Let's move forward. All right. Strawman argument number 3. Jabari's claim 600,000 men, 2.5 million, including women and children, left out of Egypt and wandered on the Sinai Peninsula. And if anybody uses that argument anymore, again, they don't understand how to triangulate data, including history, archaeology, and being able to exegete the passage properly, because that many people did not leave out of ancient Kemet. Those amount of Semites never left out of ancient Kemet. So when you go look at my methodology that I utilize to come to my certain conclusions, you'll understand why I did it. My response is the fallacy based on a misinterpretation of Exodus 12:37. I did an entire lecture on this subject matter called Revisiting Exodus 12:37, how many Israelites actually exited out of Egypt. The Israelites wandered in northwest Arabia for 40 years and were seen as Shasu Bedouins. And we're going to get into that later. Again, family, if he watched this video, he would have not made that claim of 600,000 men, 2.5 million, including women and children. Where the hell was he getting this at? I don't teach that. And again, my work, especially this work, is in an article that's being peer reviewed that will be published soon, sometime soon. So what I'm saying is he's not looking at my corrective history analysis. He's not looking at that, right? And this is what my gift to my community, because I'm here to serve you guys, all right? So I was going over this. I was talking, but y'all couldn't hear me, but y'all could read it, you know. My interpretation of Exodus 12:37 is, and they journeyed offspring of Israel from Ramses to Succoth at 600 clan, or clan of 600. And that word, the important word there is elep, right? Not alephim, but elep. This is very important. And when you watch that video, you'll see how I make the distinction. Foot soldiery, that's important. Of the warrior men, ha-giborim, apart from the mitaf, or the ones that take little steps. All right. We see Reuben's amount of a clan of 46 that consisted of 500 men. Simeon, clan of 59, consisted of 300 men. Gad, clan of 46, consisted of 650 men. Judah, clan of 74, consisted of 600 men. Issachar, clan of 54, consisted of 400 men. Zebulon, clan of 57, consisted of 400 men. Ephraim, 4,500, etc. Then we have the rest of them. The summary, 5,550 men over the age of 20 from the 12 tribes, right, was from that number. And 3,550 of those men registered for the infantry. And we have the references there. A collective clan of all 12 families plus Levites and strangers added up to 100,000 or less who exited out of Egypt. Details and methodology are in the video of how I came to this conclusion, right? And it's a false. Okay. My response to documentary hypothesis is one of the main theories that explains the compositional nature of the text. I'm in the process of producing my article on this subject matter to trace rudimentary authorship due to being nomadic semi-pastoralists after the wilderness wandering and successive compilations and redactions that have occurred since then up into Grecian rule. This produces a Septuagint tradition, right, during the Grecian rule. During the Hasmonean dynasty, a new scribal tradition took place. Dead Sea Scrolls was led up to the current Masoretic text manuscripts used today from proto-Masoretic text finds, which they discovered some amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls. And also to be taken into account of additional traditions is the Samaritan Pentateuch, the Nash Papyrus, and the Silver Scrolls. Silver Scrolls dates at least a portion of the Torah back to 600 BCE, which is before Persian captivity. Okay. Now y'all can go back and read over this. This is where I touch on the Graf-Wellenhauser hypothesis, which is the documentary hypothesis, was a method of textual criticism that was applied to the text to try and synchronize why we see certain differences in style and word usage, etc., replete throughout the Torah. Okay, and again, they date it back to 850 BCE for the Elohist. The Yahwist goes back to at least 950 BCE. The Deuteronomists, they date to about 621 BCE, and the priestly element, they date back to 587 to 400 BCE, which would be the exile to Babylon, as well as a return back to Persian captivity. All right. So again, I don't know how familiar he is with this stuff, but if he is familiar with it, the common general consensus using this, the documentary hypothesis, it at least pushes the earliest back to 950 BCE in Judah. Okay. And that is during the time of the monarchy rule. All right. Here's the Silver Scrolls. Some of y'all may be familiar with it. If you're not, I'll let you read this. You can pause it and read it. But this actually brings the Torah, a written Torah, at least back to 600 BCE, because this was used as an amulet, right? It was written on a piece of parchment, and it was rolled up and placed into an amulet, and it was worn as a means of Aaronic priestly blessing to ward off evil spirits and misfortune. Okay. So, listen, a miscellaneous strawman argument. All right. Regarding the origin of some Kemetic kings and health issues due to meat eating. Look at this. Jabari says and states that all the kings of ancient Kemet were from Nubian stock, or Nubian lineage, not Nubian stock, excuse me, Nubian lineage going back to prehistory period, and that all of the native Egyptians were mainly Africans. And he also said, when he was speaking to Brother Reggie, that they were all vegans, right? Which we know some of the priests for 40 years were vegans, as they was while they was in the priesthood, they were vegans. But this was not, this did not exemplify the fact that everybody in ancient Kemet were vegans, especially in the Sut. And the Sut was supposed to be the head, you know, the head honcho. He's supposed to set the example for everybody under his rule and reign. And these the Suits, they were not vegans. Okay, first let's look at the mummy DNA unravels ancestry of ancient Egyptians. The tombs of the ancient Egyptians have yielded golden collars and ivory bracelets and another treasure. Human DNA has proved elusive. Now scientists have captured sweeping genomic information from Egyptian mummies. It reveals that mummies were closely related to ancient Middle Easterners, hinting that Northern Africans might have different genetic roots from people south of the Sahara Desert. Okay. I'm gonna leave this up here for you guys to read. I don't want to read through all of it, but I'm gonna get through it. But if you continue to look at this article, it goes to tell you that a lot of these Egyptians and some of these kings were from Middle Eastern stock. Okay. Name of article is called Mummy DNA Unravels Ancestry of Ancient Egyptians. Y'all can go back and read that. It's a genetic analysis, reveals a close relationship with Middle Easterners, not Central Africans. Go back and read that. Over here, I have from NCBI, which is a medical scientific database with articles that are peer-reviewed. And it talks about atherosclerosis in ancient Egyptian mummies, the Heru study. And it says the purpose of this study was to determine whether ancient Egyptians had atherosclerosis. It gives you the background, the methods, and the results is this. 44 of 52 mummies had identifiable cardiovascular structures, and 20 of these had either definite atherosclerosis, which is the calcification and hardening of the arterial walls by means of plaque buildup. It says, or probable atherosclerosis. It tells you the amount. Calcifications were found in the aorta, as well as the coronary, carotid, iliac, femoral, and peripheral leg arteries. The 20 mummies with definite or probable atherosclerosis were older at the time of death, the mean age of 45. Then the mummies with CV tissue but no atherosclerosis, which was about the age of 34. So as they got older, you have more calcification, more plaque hardening of the aorta, of the arteries, etc. Evidence of severe arterial atherosclerosis with calcification in virtually every arterial bed. Definite coronary atherosclerosis was present in 2 mummies, including a princess who lived between 1550 to 1580 BCE. This finding represents the earliest documentation of coronary atherosclerosis in a human. Definite or probable atherosclerosis was present in mummies who lived during virtually every era of ancient Egypt, represented in this study, a time span of 2,000 years. Conclusions: atherosclerosis is commonplace in mummified ancient Egyptians. Now, let's look at a source of atherosclerosis. There's long been a perception that eating steak, hamburger, lamb, and other red meat ups the risk of heart disease. The saturated fat and cholesterol they deliver have been cited as key culprits. A team from half a dozen U.S. right? Let me get back to this. I don't know why I think every time it resets, it kicks out the camera and the audio, but okay. So I went over the conquest model, and I was just reading the conquest model because I'm showing you there's many models that are there. And then now I'm dealing with the peaceful infiltration model, all right? And I was reading on to that, and I'm gonna finish what I picked up on, but y'all can read it yourselves. It says the peaceful infiltration model seems logical until one tries to identify the supposed pastoral nomads in the archaeological record. According to Deir, the infiltration model of all may be based on romanticized 19th century view of the Bedouin combined with ignorance about the opposition of pastoral nomadic systems. In fact, Deir believes that many of the theories on the emergence of Israel as derived from pastoral nomadic origins are questionable. As is shown below, we argue against this view. For Finkelstein, Alt was the first scholar to recognize the value of geography, ecology, and sociology for examining the question of Israelite settlement. It was Alt's student, M. Knopf, who viewed the hill country of Canaan as the key to understanding the emergence of Israel. Knopf differentiated early and late compositions. The condensed description of the conquest in the first half of the book of Joshua belongs to the latter category, and a contradictory tradition scattered in Joshua 15 and Judges 1 to the former one. And Joshua 15 and Judges 1 that Knopf tried to investigate in relation to the archaeological data, field surveys in Galilee by Y. Aroni in the 1950s led him to support the peaceful infiltration model. So let's move forward. All right, we have the peasant revolt model. I'm gonna bring that out. This is what I was mentioning there, and this is also considered the withdrawal model, right? This is what I was trying to tell Jabari. The third model was developed by G. Mendenhall. Keep his name in mind. He's the one that came up with this theory. He suggested that the Israelites emerged not from outside Canaan, but from local urban sites. Accordingly, the exodus from Egypt, if it occurred, involved a very small population. So even this model subscribes that there were Semites or Asiatics who left out of Egypt and settled in Canaan. All right. Accordingly, according to this model, the people who became known as Israelites were really lower class Canaanite peasants who revolted against their urban ruling class in the LB cities of Canaan. After their uprising in the lowland towns, they fled to the central highlands where they joined other groups, among them probably a few pastoralists, and coalesced into a people called Israel under the new deity Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh. The peasant revolt model was developed and spun by G. Gottwald. He agrees that the Israelites emerged from within Canaanite society, but using a Marxist approach, believes that the reasons for fission were economic and not theological. Again, this is where this comes from. This model's appeal resides on the fact that it is based on sociological and anthropological analogies inspired from research on other societies. This is especially the case for scholars who consider that there is no reliable history in the Bible until the exile to Babylon. And there are a number of problems with the peasant revolt model. First, there's a striking lack of concern for the environmental characteristics of Canaan, where the Israelite settlement took place. All right. They also fail to appreciate the dynamics of pastoral systems in the Near East by dismissing any role for pastoral-based societies in the late Bronze Age and early Iron Age because of their assumption that Bedouins could not have existed at that time. This position is based on the view that the camel was not domesticated at that time. Thus, no population could have subsisted in the remote, deep desert area of the Near East during the late Bronze Age. More recent data show that the camel was probably domesticated by 3000 BCE, making it indeed possible for deep penetration into Near Eastern deserts as early as the early Bronze Age. In short, Mendenhall makes no use of archaeological evidence, while Gottwald relies solely on data from the large Canaanite tells without considering the new data from settlement pattern studies. Now, Israel Finkelstein and Neil Silberman, they have a modified form of the peasant revolt model. And when you read the Bible on Earth, they express it in there. There's also the symbiosis model, right, which is a fringe model. But again, my subscription is that there was a conquest, a settlement, and there was a revolt or a withdrawal and an emergence due to neighboring threats of a nation of people, okay? But they were not a nation of people until at least the late 11th century, early 10th century BCE, okay? Now I'll read here in the green, right? You can read the red for yourselves. The Egyptian records, the Egyptian records emphasize Pharaoh's military successes. The Meneptah Stela considered above mentions Israel as a confederation of tribes. Ramses III defeated the Sea Peoples reasserted Egyptian control over much of Canaan and recruited the defeated enemy and mercenaries for the garrisons in the Levant as well as Nubia. In the Papyrus Harris, Ramses III claimed to have defeated and destroyed the Seraite clans of the Shasu. Keep that in mind. I have destroyed the Seraites of the clans of the Shasu people. I plundered their tent camps of the people and possessions and their cattle likewise. They being without number, they being bound and carried away as captives as tribute of Egypt. It is obvious from the above quote that pastoral nomadic groups, generically termed Shashu, were targets of Egyptian military expeditions between 1182 and 1151 BCE. They were dwelling in tent camps and herding cattle. At first glance, the identity of the Shashu seems to be crucial for the clarification of ethnic affiliation of at least some of the Levantine pastoral nomadic peoples. This is unfortunately not the case because the term Shasu refers to different groups occupying widespread locations in Moab, Edom, and southern Transjordan land, and in northern and southern Palestine, as well as Syria. It thus appears that the term was a generic designation of non-city state, that is, tribal peoples who were linked with a variety of territories across the Egyptian sphere of influence, which would be the Israelites when they exited out of Kemet and settled into Canaan, right? They were known by different names, but they were also identified as Israel or Israel and Israel by two reliefs that we're going to look at, because they were Shashu or Bedouins that were wandering there, and they were also identified as being these Israelites or these Israelite peoples. And we're going to get into that, okay? Now here, I'm going to read this last one. It says, the dynamics of pastoral nomadic socio-economic systems are much more erratic than urban agricultural-based ones. Rapid growth and sharp decline of the herds, the species composition of herds, the needed labor force, the extension and contraction of territorial ranges, and grazing land requirements are always combined and may generate unpredictable socio-political situations. If the main types of economic pursuits attested in historical and archaeological records of Palestine from 1500 to 1000 BCE are considered within an agricultural pastoral continuum, the recurrent mentions of the Shashu may therefore indicate a phase of pastoral expansionism during the late Bronze Age. The exogenous model is relating to or developing from external factors. So if you hear the term exogenous, it means that the emergence of the Israelite people in the central countryside came from an outside source. The endogenous model means that they arose from out of the Canaanite peoples, withdrew and settled in the central countryside, and they became a nation state, right? I subscribe to the exogenous model, all right? And then an initial exogenous model and a later on endogenous model, all right? So Shaka Amos versus DivineProspect versus Jabari, the withdrawal model is not the peasant revolt model. This is what Jabari says. A book called The Trials of Yahweh, a sociology of religion of liberated Israel from 1250 to 1050 BCE, has a quote right there that says, the fact is, and the present writer would regard it as a fact, though not every detail can be proven, that the Amarna materials and the biblical events represent politically the same process, namely the withdrawal, not physically and geographically, but politically and subjectively of large population groups from any obligation to the existing political regimes, and therefore the renunciation of any protection from those sources. In other words, there was no statistically important invasion of Palestine at the beginning of the 12-tribe system of Israel. There was no radical displacement of population. There was no genocide. There was no large-scale driving out of population, only of royal administrators of necessity. In summary, there was no real conquest of Palestine at all. What happened instead may be termed, from the point of view of the secular historian interested only in socio-political progress, a peasant's revolt against a network of interlocking Canaanite states. And this individual who made this quote, they subscribe to the peasant revolt model. But I'm showing this because it says here in the second highlighted part, the peasant's revolt model is more broadly characterized as a withdrawal model. The clear implication is that the armed revolts that occurred took place within the context of a socio-political movement, and that we will understand the military events and the demographic movements only as we understand the fuller socio-political movement. So I wonder if Jabari even fully studied this, because if he did, he would know that the peasant revolt model is the withdrawal model. It's the same thing. This is what I was saying to him in the time marker above, and he just was not understanding me because apparently he's not familiar with this information. All right. Now I'll give a reference here, and this deals with the Shashu peoples, right? The present paper should be viewed as a work in progress because archaeological research on Iron Age Edom is still in its infancy. However, it has become increasingly clear from our work in the lowlands of Edom is the importance of conceptualizing the Edomites as one of a number of tribal peoples who emerged out of the ethnic melting pot of northwestern Arabia and southern Jordan towards the end of the late Bronze Age. This certainty included the Israelites, Edomites, and Midianites. As noted above, the close link between Esau, who was Edom, and his twin brother Jacob, Israel, are well known. The links between the late Bronze Age and early Iron Age Israelites and the Midianites, whose core territory was situated in northern Hijaz, were both consanguineous and acrimonious, as were the links between the Israelites and Edomites. And Frank Moore Cross's article, Reuben, Firstborn of Jacob, a case is made for close relations between the Israelites and Midianites based on the tradition that Moses married a Midianite woman and tended the flock of the priests of Midian, and based on the central role played by the Midianites at Mount Sinai. Keep that in mind, where the priests of Midian offered sacrifices to Yahweh and instituted a judicial system, Exodus 18. For a variety of reasons, including the fact that the distinctively decorated Midianite pottery, also referred to Hijaz or Kuraya, where is not found in the Sinai Peninsula, but is found radiating from the Midianite center in Kuraya. Here's some of the archaeological artifacts and extractions and excavation that's done. A scarab was even found there in grave 92. Northwestern Arabia and throughout southern Jordan and Timna in southern Israel, Cross argues that Mount Sinai, Horeb, must be sought in southern Edom or northern Midian and not in Sinai Peninsula. So when he talks about the Mount Sinai, the real Mount Sinai was in the Sinai Peninsula, I don't know what this guy's talking about, but that's not my subscription. But let's keep reading. In conclusion, 12th to 9th century BCE, Edomite identity was shaped by local peer polity, interaction, and processes of resistance to neighboring related societies such as the Israelites and Midianites, and social groups linked together through blood and marriage ties. This relationship extended back in time to the period when the only name we can link to the inhabitants of Seir, Edom, and Northwest Arabia is the Egyptian term Shasu. So the area of Northwest Arabia, the Israelites, Midianites, and Edomites, who resided along the Mount Seir into the real Mount Sinai region, were known as the Shashu peoples to the Egyptians. This is very important and very key when it comes to identifying who the Israelites were considered externally by the Egyptians and how they would have been seen, right? And all of this, these excavational reports shows us that the Israelites were Mount Sinai, the Midianites and Edomites were closely related, and they were there in that region because that's where the Israelites wandered for about 40 years, okay? So they would have been grouped together with the rest of the Edomites and the Midianites and the other Shashus, Bedouins that was in that region there. And again, when we go back and look at the Exodus account to see how many actually exited out, it makes sense that they could have been sustained in that region. Okay, it says by the time the 6th century BCE biblical editors compiled the Hebrew Bible, the various competing Northwestern Arabian ethnic groups were known as Midianites, Edomites, and Israelites, and the relationships among them were understood in terms of kinship, marriage, history, and myth. We do know that the tension and resistance between the two related societies, Israel and Edom, continued to be strong at this time and fueled the processes of Edomite and Israelite ethnogenesis. Here's one of the proposed Exodus routes that is close to what I subscribe to. As you can see where Goshen is, or Ramses. They went down to Sukkot, and that area of Sukkot that you see there is actually Serebin El Kadim. And when you go back to my lecture, was the Meduneter, was deciphering the Meduneter necessary to formulate the ancient Hebrew Abjad? I go more in depth into that there. Then they either crossed over the sea, or they went towards, they went around, rounding up over to Ezion Geber, or straight from Sukkot to Ezion Geber in the wilderness of Egypt. And they crossed over either by land or by sea, and they ended up in the region of where it says the land of Midian. And when you see where it says laws or Mount Al-Laws, which is the real Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb, this is the region where the text says that Moses received the 10 Commandments, and all these other various supernatural things occurred. It was in this region here. And if you move north of that region, you see up the top where it says the Canaanites, the Amalekites, and the Edomites. All of this was a mountainous region here from Mount Hor or Seir going all the way into where we see Mount Al-Laws or Mount Sinai. So the people who resided in this area would have been known as who? As the Shashu. And if you look at the Way of Heru, this is one of the routes that was taken by the Nasuts And the other one, other dotted line that you see there, the one that goes to Beersheba, Hebron, was another route taken about in the Sut. So you don't see no military outposts that are over here during the Dutmosted dynasty, where Mount Al-Lawz is, that the Israelites and the Egyptians would have bumped into each other. This is very important in understanding this, family. All right. Now I have a map here showing you the geography of the central mountains where the Israelites settled and they emerged as a nation state people in this region. I show you the coastal plains, which a lot of it was being ruled by the an offset of the sea peoples, the Peleset or the Philistines, also known as the Paraset in the Egyptian Medunetia, right? And the Central Hill country goes all the way from Upper Galilee all the way down to the Negev, okay? Now, if you look on the right, you'll see here the various sites where that's mentioned in the Bible, right, where various things occurred. And some of these sites are not mentioned in the Bible, but these are things to note. Now, what I want you to pay attention to, I want you to pay attention to Jerusalem, to Jericho, right, to Lachish, to Shechem, to Hazor. I want you to pay attention to those main sites because it's going to make my point that a conquest did take place after the Exodus. So my stance is that the Exodus occurred anywhere from 1410 to 1400 BCE. I'm sorry, from 1446 to from 1450 BCE to 1440 BCE. That's when the Exodus took place. The 40 years of wilderness wandering ended at either 1410 to 1400 BCE, and after that wilderness wandering, they were in the north of the Edomites or the Midianites that were north of them in the Jordan area. They crossed over the Jordan and they entered into Canaan. Okay, so that period of time would be in the 14th century. So the Exodus and wilderness wandering is in the 15th century BCE from my model that I'm going to show you, and they entered into the land during the 14th century BCE, where they were waging some military campaigns in there that was occurring. And we're going to see what happened, because when they was fighting, when the Israelites were fighting, remember I told you the amount of them that were there, were fighting these peoples. They were mostly fighting the kings and the armies, right? And these are the people that they were fighting. And the reason why this is important is because we're going to see administration go back and forth from the vassal kings in this region in the late Bronze Age to the Egyptians asking for assistance, and we're going to find it right here, right? Now, Jabari admits that the Habiru are the historical Hebrews. That's what he says. I say that the Habiru, that the Hebrews or the ancient Israelites make up some of the Habiru. The Habiru is not only the Israelites. There were other groups as well that was upsetting the establishment that was in Canaan that was set up by the Egyptian hegemony and the vassal kings of the Canaanites, okay? But he says that the Habiru are the historical Hebrews, and that's the time marker. I say that the Habirus, some of them were made up of the ancient Israelites that exited out of Egypt, all right? Now, looking at the Amarna tablets, right, it says, let's go to the second paragraph, right? It says, from the eternal evidence, the earliest possible date for this correspondence, which is the Amarna tablets, is the final decade of the reign of Amenhotep III, who ruled between 1388 to 1351 or 1391 to 1353 BCE, possibly as early as the king's 30th regnal year. The latest date any of these letters were written is the destruction of the city of Amarna, commonly believed to have happened in the second year of the reign of Tutankhamun, excuse me, later in the same century in 1332 BCE. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because that in blue is very important. Amenhotep III and that timeline. And once you guys will start picking it up, you'll see how I'm showing you the patterns of evidence for my Exodus account. All right. Now, here's some of you guys can read some of this. Right. Amarna tablet EA 148 says, from the May of Tyre, the May of Sidon, the May of Hazor has aligned themselves with the Habiru. Right. And we know Hazor was one of the sites that was raised by Joshua and the Israelites. Right. Tablet EA 243 says, the May of Megiddo, I am guarding Megiddo, the city of Pharaoh, day and night, as the warring of the Habiru in the land is severe. Right? Tablet EA 246 says, from the May of Megiddo to Pharaoh, the two sons of Labayu have given money to the Habiru and the Sutians to wage war against me. Labayu, May of Shechem, to the king, I am loyal, servant of the king. I am not a rebel. I am not delinquent. Moreover, the king wrote about my son. I did not know that my son had joined with the Habiru. All right. From Milkili, mayor of Gezer, king, the war against me and Shuwar Data, mayor of Hebron, is severe. Save your land from the power of the Hibiru. Now, again, these are the vassal kings, administration writing to the Kemetic kings, right? And you can read the rest of them. Again, pay attention to Gezer and the Habiru, right? The next one, from Abiheba, mayor of Jerusalem, to King Pharaoh, the king has no lands. Habiru has plundered all the lands, right? Pharaoh has placed his name in Jerusalem forever, but it says he cannot abandon the land of Jerusalem. Gezer, Ashkelon, and Lachish have given oil, food, and supplies to the Habiru. This should be the last slide on it. It says, Amarna tablet EA 239, to the king, my Lord, my God, my son, the son of the sky. It talks about the mayor of Lachish, right? And it talks about these people rising against the king, the kings in Lachish. EA 288 says, from the mayor of Jerusalem to the king, the Habiru have taken all the cities. Not a single mayor remains. And it says, 2 different individuals were slain in the city gates of Shiloh. Habiru killed Zimretta of Lachish. The king did nothing. Why? This is important. This is evidence of a conquest going on, or an uprising going on within Canaan. And this lines up perfectly with the reconstructive historical chronology of the Exodus account. All right. Now, do we have evidence of Israelites being in Canaan during that time period? And I'm going to pause right here to make sure y'all can hear me. Check the chat, make sure y'all can hear me. All right. All right. Press 1 if y'all can hear me. Press 1 if y'all can hear me. Anybody in the chat, press 1 if y'all can hear me. Okay, good. All right, let me go back. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going. All right, so I had to take a look at this for a second. Okay, make sure everything's good there. All right, let's go back. Let's go back. All right. Okay. So here, the Berlin pedestal relief, okay? Let's read here in the highlighted, and y'all can pause it and read the rest of it if you want. Gorg also concluded, based on the spelling of the names, that they were copied from an early inscription from around the time of Amenhotep II, which is important, 1453 to 1419. Israeli Egyptologist Raphael Giveon previously dated the inscription to the reign of Amenhotep III, which is where I lean towards, all right? Amenhotep III, 1386 or 1349, where we see this actual topographical statue-based relief with the mention of Israel or Israel. And that's very, very important. Israel is very important. Now, y'all can pause it and read it, but this right here places the ancient Israelites, right, in the region of Canaan during the reign of Amenhotep III, when the first correspondences was going on with the Amarna tablets and the vassal kings being revolted against by these Hebrew peoples, okay? Now, Israel Berlin statue pedestal relief, and as you can see, how the reconstruction took place for us to see that it's Israel, okay, or Israel. The L and R is interchangeable in the Medunetia, okay. Now, the Shashu of Yahoo, extra-biblical inscriptions and archaeological finds, 2 hieroglyphic references dating to the New Kingdom period refer to the land of the Shashu of Yahoo. These are the oldest references to Yahoo outside the Bible. The Shashu of Yahoo is found on inscription from Nubian temples of Soleb and Armara West and corresponds precisely to the Tetragrammaton. The Shashu are definitively connected to the Horites of Seir and Edom, or modern Jordan, and it's what they call the Transjordan region. Lists of place names in Nubian temples of Soleb and Amara West record 6 toponyms located in the land of the Shashu. A monument of Ramses II claims that he has plundered the Shashu land, captured the mountain of Seir in Edom. A 19th dynasty later mentions the Shashu tribes of Edom, and Ramses III declares that he has destroyed the Seirites among the tribes of the Shashu. So remember, later on in the 19th dynasty, during the Ramesside dynasty, now you see more infiltration of military campaigns going towards Northwest Arabia. What's interesting is that the Israelites were already in the land at this time. So this is why you're not going to have no records of the Israelites being in the Transjordan by the Ramesside dynasty, because they was already in Canaan at that time. Keep this in mind. The Soleb temple, located on the left bank of the Nile, just south of the Third Cataract, was built around 1400 BC by Pharaoh Amenhotep III. of the 18th dynasty. Keep that in mind. Amara West was the seat of the Egyptian administration of Upper Nubia or Kush or Tas-Seti from the reign of Seti I onwards. The section of the Amara West topographical list, which contains a reference to the land of the Shashu of Yahuwah, was copied from the earlier list at Soleb. Donald B. Redford writes of Soleb reference to Yod-He-Wafe. For half a century, it has been generally admitted that we have here the Tetragrammaton, the name of the Israelite god Yod-He-Wafe. And this be the case, as it undoubtedly is, the passage constitutes the most precious indication of the whereabouts during the late 15th century BCE of an enclave revering this god. And we're going to see this. Where is this toponym mentioned in regards to the Shashu of Yahu, this enclave? Where was it located at? In the region of Canaan. So now we have these Shashu Benjamin people who are connected to this Yod-He-Wav deity. And we also have the Habiru in this region at the same time. And also now we have a worship to a foreign deity that was foreign to the land of Canaan at that time. And we have these excursions and these military campaigns going throughout Canaan, as we see in the Amarna tablets. Now we also have a Amenhotep from the Berlin pedestal relief. He also makes a mention of some of those peoples in that area. All of these patterns of evidence, which places the Israelites there, conquesting, fighting, settling, emerging, being identified by the Egyptians, etc. Here's all the evidence there for you right there, family. All right. And here's another article, the Shashu of Yahu Yahuwah and the date of the Exodus. You guys can read this. It's a lot. I'm not going to read it to save some time, but it's saved here. So this is further evidence, and this is going to be on the record so you can read it. I'll pause it right here. So you always pause this so you can read it. Okay, now let's read the bottom. While the term Shashu is used primarily of semi-nomadic Semitic herders who live north of Egypt, it also has a secondary usage in some New Kingdom texts for the geographic areas where the Shashu live. When used geographically in Egyptian texts, the hieroglyphic term Ta, which means land, is used, and this word should be translated as land of. In the case of these two references that we are discussing, the Egyptian phrase is Ta Shashu Yahweh, which is the land of the Shashu of Yahuwah. The term Shashu is almost exclusively used in a New Kingdom text for semi-nomadic peoples living in parts of Lebanon, Syria, Sinai, Canaan, and Transjordan. Keep that in mind, Canaan and the Transjordan. When used for nomads living in these areas, the term Shashu seems to have been used by Egyptians almost exclusively for people groups that can clearly be identified as Semitic herders. Right? Then it goes to show, was Yahweh a place name? Let's move forward. Let's read the conclusion. It is clear that there once was a group of Shashu Bedouin nomads living in Syria, Palestine, who were associated with either a deity or a place named Yahuwah. It is also clear that the name Yahuwah was known to Egyptians in the 18th dynasty during the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. But it must be admitted at this point that we also know from the Old Testament that there were other worshippers of Yahuwah in Canaan who did not go into Egypt and therefore did not leave Egypt at the time of the Exodus. The question thus arises, were they perhaps the Shashu of Yahu mentioned as Soleb and Amara? Although we don't have all the information that we wish we did, it is significant that there are no mentions of the Shashu of Yahuwah in Egyptian texts earlier than the reign of Amenhotep III. Keep that in mind. He would have been the Nasut that would have encountered the Israelites once they exited out of Egypt and settled in the region of Canaan. If the group in question were followers of Yahuwah who never went into Egypt, why are they absent in topographical lists from the early period of the 18th dynasty, for example, from the extensive topographical list of Thutmose III? The reason may very well be because the Shashu of Yahweh were indeed the Israelites and that they were still living in Egypt in the 18th dynasty. In any case, these references to Yahweh have been ignored for far too long by both conservative and liberal biblical scholars. It thus appears very likely that the Shashu of Yahweh who are mentioned in the topographical text at Soleb and Amara West were the Israelites who by 1400 BCE had settled into their own land, Ta, and the mountains of Canaan. It also appears that for the ancient Egyptians, that one feature that distinguished the Israelites from all the other Shashu or Semitic herders in this area was their worship of the god Yahuwah, who Moshe first encountered in northwest Arabia in Midian. This was a Midianite deity that was then brought into Canaan. Oh man, please, family, please understand this. Let's move forward. Right? So here we have the Medjugorje, which we have Ta, Shashu, U, which is plural, Shashu, U. Then we have Yod, He, Wav, but the W3 is actually a determinative, which means subjugation, slaves, or a lasso. And we have U at the end, which again, anytime you see the quail chick, it indicates plurality, right? So this is the land. Ta is the land of the Shashu, plural peoples of Yahu, who were subjugated by the Nasut, the Pharaoh, or the Egyptians. All right. Now, the Menepet Stela, I'm going to read this for you real quick because it's the general consensus that the Menepet Stela mentions Israel or Israel. And the disagreement is whether or not this refers to the biblical Israelites or a different historical people. But at the end of the day, they all subscribe to the fact that it does say Israel or Israel, and they're trying to understand who this account is of. At this point of the Menepet Stela, the Israelites were not a nation. They were just a people that were living amongst the Canaanites. So they would have been identified as the local Canaanites and living amongst them and not retreating to the hill countryside. Therefore, they're going to have similar things as far as ethnic markers that you would be able to identify with the Canaanites that would be also identified as the other Shashu peoples that live amongst them, with one exception being their subscription to Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh, or living in a region or enclave where Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh was worshipped. All right. So the name Israel in the Menepet Stela of circa 1207 BC has entered a new phase of discussion and debate and recent reconstruction of the origin of ancient Israel. Some of the issues involved include a transition of the name Israel and the location and nature of the entity Israel. Attempts to resolve some of these concerns have included linguistic analysis of the designation Israel, structural analysis of the final hymnic poetic unit, and some attempts to identify archaeological correlations with Nephita's campaign in Palestine. The study assesses a number of linguistic analysis indicating that the Egyptian designation is properly translated as Israel. Our new structural analysis reveals that Israel is located within the region of Canaan and Huru, designations that stand parallel to each other. Israel is an agricultural, sedentary, social ethnic entity. The term seed, Egyptian Peret, based on contextual relations in other military texts, means grain, supporting the identification as Israel as a largely agricultural nomadic state entity. Okay, so when it says Israel is no more, his seed has been laid waste, it can mean that they destroyed their actual literal grain, or they've killed off as many of their descendants that will be responsible for repopulating this group of people. And this article goes definitely into it. You can definitely look it up by Michael G. Hazel. It's called Israel and the Menepet Stela. All right, here we have the Menepet Stela, the transcription of the Menepet Stela, and we also have the breakdown here where we have F, which means seed, his, which is a pronomial, peret, which means seed or grain, and we see here in the Medjugorje for peret, right? We have the P, the R, and the T, and then we have the lines that indicates plurality. Then we have the foot and the water symbol, which is the B and N, which means it's a negative. Right, in Hebrew, that would be Beit and Nun, which would be sun, right? And then we have FKT, which is a transcription of the Medjugorje there for waste, and Israel, and you see that there with the two reeds, excuse me. You see the mouth symbol, which is the R, you see the vulture, and then you also see the other mouth, there's an R. Then you see the Asiatic throw stick, which is indicative that these are Asiatic peoples or group of peoples. But what you don't see is the determinative of land, right? The determinative of land, which would mean that this was a nation of people, but instead it's just a group of people amongst the other peoples who was encountered by Menepet or even his predecessor, which some arguments make. But they identify a people, not a nation, right? Not a confederation, but a people that is residing in Canaan at least by 1205 BCE, right? Then we can go into pottery transition from Canaanite to Israelite. The reason why you don't see distinct Israelite pottery in Canaan during the late Bronze Age is because they mingled amongst the peoples. They lived amongst the peoples. So they took on a lot of the culturation elements of the peoples. They even worshiped after their deities at some point, right? And they married amongst these peoples. This is very important, family. This is why you don't see a distinct pottery show up in the late Bronze Age period. But then you see it later on after the close of the late Bronze Age and the emergence of the Iron Age period, okay? History of pottery in Palestine, late Bronze Age, using the influx of imported types of pottery. The pottery of this period must be divided into 4 subgroups: local pottery, bichrome group, Cypriot imported pottery, and the Mycenaean imports. This is all important because this is evidence that a new people emerged on the coastal plains when the sea peoples laid waste to Canaan and to parts of the Egyptian influence during the late Bronze Age period. Okay, but we also go into the Philistine biochrome ware, right? And I'm going to show you what represents some of the local pottery. But what's most important is the Philistine bichrome ware. This is the descendant of the imported Mycenaean ware. Look up the Mycenaean entity and see where they came from to show evidence of these sea peoples settling during the late Bronze Age, early Iron Age in the coastal plains of Canaan. Okay, and one of these individuals, groups of people, is the Philistines, right, or Peleset. And it goes to show you their ware. But then Israelite pottery starts showing up. The new Israelite settlers began by using basic types of Canaanite pottery. Look at this, until they began developing simple copies of the purchased pottery so that it met their needs. The hallmark of the early Israelite pottery is the pithoi, which is a jar used to store things, right, in Greek. They are scattered over these sites. Many of these storage jars had the collared rim, which were most popular to central part of Israel, although they have since also been found to also have been manufactured in areas outside of Israelite settlement, where Israelites would be. When we look at the Iron Age 2 from 1000 to 586, during the period of United Monarchy, Israelite pottery improved. Finishing techniques use a remarkable amount of red slip applied by hand and smooth with an irregular burnish. At the division of the kingdom, however, pottery styles broke into 2 separate traditions. Samaria ware is a general name given to the pottery of Israel, which is the northern kingdom, even though there is a wide variety of forms and styles. They can be put into 2 separate groups. The first is thick-walled with a high foot and red slipped, most often shaped as bowls, and the second is made of fine particle clay and decorated with concentric stripes. Now, if we look up here at the upper left is the Canaanite pottery, which is unfurnished, right, and very raw and rugged. What we see over to the right is the Mycenaean type pottery, Cypriot type pottery, and then later the Philistine bichrome pottery. And at the bottom, what we see is the emergence of the Israelite type pottery, which is the red burgundy that you see, the black banding, and the collared lip. All right. There's an article here which says the archaeological features to indicate Israelite presence have included the collared rim storage jar, the avoidance of painted pottery, the avoidance of imparted pottery, the absence of significant paucity of pig bones in the faunal remains, and the pillared house in the 3 or 4 room variation. These are all ethnic markers. Abraham Foss has recently reviewed the objections to seeing these features as signs of Israelite presence and has argued that with a carefully understood concept of ethnicity and with a nuanced understanding of the role of material culture and signifying identity, all these items remain useful indices of Israelite presence. All right, here's another article by Abraham Foss that we just mentioned here, where he goes into depth with it, showing the excavated finds and showing the transition of potteries from the late Bronze Age to the early Iron Age period, Iron Age 1 going into Iron Age 2. And then we start to see the Israelite pottery, which we see here, this being the rugged raw Canaanite pottery, this here being the Israelite pottery during the Iron Age period. Then we see some of the Mycenaean ware, the bichrome ware, the Cypriot ware, which we will see, which would be a hallmark of the sea peoples, more particularly the Philistines. All right, and we go see the reasons and where we find a lot of these pottery finds, which again goes with the settlement account that we mentioned earlier. Okay, now this here ends off the presentation. I know it's pretty lengthy. What time is it? Oh, gotta go to bed soon. Okay, but I'm gonna go through this timeline for y'all real quick. Let me see, and after I go through this timeline, we should be done. All right, this sums up everything. All right, now there was a 12th dynasty entrance into Kemet, Middle Kingdom settlement in Goshen. We have the Bene Hassar relief, which shows Semitic herders entering into the region of Avaris and even into ancient Kemet, which is evidence of these tribal Semitic or Asiatics that was migrating into Kemet, whether it's in the eastern Nile Delta or going towards the south. We have the Bar Yosef Canal, where we see that there were Semites that were working there with the other Nubians, Hurrians, Libyans, etc., working on that canal that just popped up out of nowhere during the Middle Kingdom period. And when we look further into the evidence for the Bar Yosef Canal, it was to stave off famine so that the Nile wouldn't overly inundate and flood out everything. So that way you can't plant grain, that you can't graze cattle, it will kill off your cattle, etc. This will force a famine if the Nile overflows. So the Bar Yosef Canal was created to empty some of the Nile into the Faiyum Basin area, or Lake Meroez, all right? And the Elohun and the Avaris site, which I spoke on earlier, where the excavation of Manfred Bitek shows that evidence. And then we go to chapter 10 of that excavation report, where it talks about the 18th dynasty settlement area and the activity from the finds that they discovered there, okay? The Hyksos is exposed, and Avaris is eventually taken over by the Thutmose dynasty, right? Later on, after Amos, and who then made a naval base there, right? And we have the evidence from Tel, Habuwal, the Pharaonic naval base, and the Minoan frescoes all shows us that the Thutmose dynasty set up a military outpost there. They even had like a semi kind of throne type situation set up there, and they were having Nubian soldiers or Nubian bowmen that were settling there as well, and other Semites that still lived in that region that were forced to work on the storage silo buildings administrated by the state. And we saw the evidence of that as well, all right? The Semites who remained, right, after the Hyksos got expelled, they increased rapidly while under captivity. So this increase happened from the 12th dynasty all the way up into the 18th dynasty, and we have the Brooklyn Papyrus, as well as the other evidences that I showed you earlier that verifies this, okay? The Thutmose dynasty puts these Semites to work to build storage silos, and we see that by looking at the excavational reports at Pi Ramses of the northern district of Avaris and Tel El Retaba, supposed to be Retaba, not Reteba, which would represent Pithom. An incident occurs that causes this workforce to abandon their post and exit Kemet. That could be due to the Thera eruption. Look into that. I also mentioned that in the minority report. Plagues, a revolt, etc. Okay. The number of refugees who leave are around 90,000 or less during the 18th dynasty. And if you go back and watch my lecture on revisiting Exodus 12 and 37, you'll see how I came to that conclusion. All right. So we know it wasn't 2.5 million people that left out. All right. They traveled from Avaris to Serebet El Kadim on Sukkoth. And we have evidence of a settlement of Semites there, looking at the Serebet El Kadim inscriptions. And if you go back to my lecture, was the deciphering of the Medu Neter necessary to formulate the ancient Hebrew Abjad? And you'll see more evidence that I give for that over here. And from Serebet El Kadim, they then traveled to Northwest Arabia and are known as the Shashu by the Egyptians. The Egyptians knew the peoples in Northwest Arabia as the Shashu, as evidence from reliefs that we have from Ramses II and Ramses III, more particularly dealing with the Shashu of Seir, or those who lived in the mountain of Seir, or even Mount Hor, all right, or the Horites. They remained in this region for 40 years, and some preliminary extra biblical references for that has not been properly analyzed or excavated. That reason hasn't been properly excavated by a team, because it's now gated off. So you can't go there and look at these things, this information that was once brought to light. But some evidences of their wandering there would be the split rock, the petroglyph, the 12 springs, 70 palm trees, 12 pillar foundation stones, and the blackened mountain peak. Go back to the Modern Report Part 1, and you'll see me expound on all of that. All right, now look at this. Amenhotep in his second Asiatic campaign, because we're saying that the Exodus happened during the time of Thutmose II or Amenhotep II. This is when the Exodus occurred. But look at what Amenhotep II does. In his second Asiatic campaign, he goes into Canaan and takes almost 100,000 captives plus spoils back to Kemet to replenish his workforce. And the second Asiatic campaign of Amenhotep III is evidence of that. All right. This is why I say when you properly interpret how many left out, you'll see why Amenhotep II had to go back into Canaan and get all these captives to replenish a workforce that was lost. All right. If these Semites, which are ones that exited out, then travel north to Jordan after they wandered for 40 years in that region of Northwest Arabia, and cross the river into Canaan towards Jericho. Numbers 33:48 and Joshua 3:14 give evidence of that. They commenced several battles here as part of the Hibiru, and then settle amongst the natives, becoming indistinguishable by outside entities such as the Egyptians, right? The modern tablets, the book of Joshua and Judges, helps to expound on that, plus all the references that I showed you guys earlier. Amenhotep III goes on a campaign into Canaan and takes some of these Semites captive, and a group of them are identified as Israel, and the evidence of that is the burning pedestal step relief. And Amenhotep III identifies these Israelites, or an enclave of those peoples there, as the Shashu of Yahoo. Now we have evidence of a campaign, military campaign going out through Canaan, where these kings, these vassal kings, are being uprooted, overthrown, and their military is being squandered. Amenhotep goes in, Amenhotep II goes into Canaan and brings back 100,000 captives to replenish his workforce. We see that after this battle was going on, it was attributed to these Habiru peoples. Also in this land was these Shashu, who was the enclave of Yahuwah, or was in the region of Yahuwah, or worshiped the deity Yahuwah. And as well, some of those individuals that was there was known as Israel, according to the Berlin Step pedestal relief, right? As you see all of this information falling down and going straight down. The Israelites remain among the Canaanites as a people until the collapse of the Bronze Age from the Meneptah Stela. We see that they're still there in that region as a people, not as a nation. All right. The arrival of the sea peoples then drive them into the central countryside. And while settling there, they started to emerge as their own culture. Now we see the pottery transition, distinct ethnic markers, etc., which is the lack of pig bones, the cultic items they're buried with, their burials, the 4-room mud brick houses, etc. Okay. Due to the expansion and antagonism of the Philistines, they formed a political coalition by the 10th century BCE. When we look at Kerbik, Caiapha, Tel Arad, we see these things start to emerge as evidences of a nation or outposts from a monarchy being situated there. And we go to 1 Samuel chapter 7 and chapter 8, it gives us more information to show their conflicts with the Philistines. And then chapter 8, they're asking or requesting for a king so they can become a monarchy to be organized to fight against these Philistines. Because if the Philistines were part of the sea peoples, which we've identified them to be, they would have had a long history as being a conglomerate nation of people, right? Stemming from the Aegean Sea regions where they resided formerly as a nation of peoples, and then coming along onto the coastal plains of Canaan, settling there, and all they would be doing was being equally as organized as they once were when they was in the Aegean Sea. Now they would make them a more formidable foe to buffering the Israelites, and while the Israelites had to buffer back by setting up and establishing a monarchy or their own dynasty. And then now, these peoples that we see from all the timeline that I gave you, and all this evidence, they were later identified as Israel, the house of David, Beit Dawid, house of Omri, Beit Omri, and followers of Yod-Heh-Wav-Heh. And we see this evidence in the Assyrian reliefs, the Taldan and Moabite stelas, right? So this is my preliminary historical Exodus and settlement model by my organization, Kingdom Harbor Ministries. And this is with all the evidence aggregated together to give you a outline of what occurred and how we can substantiate the biblical Exodus through history and the archaeological record and anthropological elements, looking at the digs that they found, the digs that they made, the excavation that they made, and the items that they've had extracted for that. Forgive me, I'm a little tired, family. It's really late, all right? And I'm going to stop here. So now that you have this outline, you have this information, I'm going to pick up and continue here. And I'm just going to read this last slide, but I'm going to finish the rest in part 2. And this is the question I wanted to ask Jabari. Are you familiar with Amahai Mazar and Israel Finkelstein's chronological approaches and contentions? Because he cited, this is from his book, he cited Amahai Mazar twice. No Jews built the pyramids because Jews didn't exist at the period when the pyramids were built. If the Hebrews built anything, then it was the city of Ramses as mentioned in Exodus, right? Amahai Mazar, which is the professor at the Institute of Archaeology at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So now looking at this, I also agree that the pyramid, like Khufu's pyramid and all those pyramids at Giza, they were not built by the Israelites. That's not my subscription, and I agree with Amahai Mazar in this case. But I agree more further that it was the 18th dynasty where we had these storage cities that was built under the Thutmose reign and rule. Okay. He also quotes Amahai Mazar, professor at the Institute of Archaeology at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, proclaimed no Jews built the pyramids because Jews didn't exist at the period when the pyramids were built. Now, interestingly enough, he cites from Israel Finkelstein and Amahai Mazar, but he never says anything about their contention regarding the chronology, the low, mid, and high chronology differences that these two scholars and PhD scholars have in regards to the emergence of the nationhood state of the ancient Israelites. He doesn't mention that, which goes to show me he's not aware of this. Jabari is not aware of this, but that's okay. I'm going to school him in the second part when we return to this. So I'm going to pause right here. Okay. So now let's finish this up. It's almost 4 o'clock in the morning, but I'm about to go to bed and get some rest. So that was about 2.5 hours. What time I started? I think I started at 12:30. So it might have been almost 3 hours. Almost 3 hours of information. Now, family. Let me go look at the chat. Now I gotta go to the chat. All right. Now let's look at this here. All right. I see some kind of discussion going on in here, whatever. Okay. So let's get the subject matter back to what I presented, if y'all don't mind. All right. Now, please give me your feedback in regards to what you just saw, and let me know why you would see why Jabari, right? Shaka, Sa-Netta, everybody else. Yeah, I know vocab is in here trying to throw shots. I'm not even paying vocab any mind, right? Because the purpose of this was for people that was following the debate, and for people who were interested in seeing my full debate PowerPoint presentation. So if anybody's talking about anything outside of that, is irrelevant, right? Because this is not what this discussion is about. So I'm not going to bring it to a theological discussion. I'm not going to bring it to some other kind of discussion, because that's not what this lecture is about. So let's go back and stay focused, okay? So family, give me your feedback on how you think this presentation was put together. Also, let me know, how do you think the audience on Black News 102, Sa-Netta Studio, Sa-Netta TV would have felt if they saw this entire presentation? It only shows you the first half. I got to get into the rest of it in part 2, which I'll do another day. I'll do part 2 for y'all. But I need y'all to tell me, what do y'all think about that? Hit 1 if you thought this was a powerful presentation, right? That you see why, after I gave them a glimpse of it, why they had to keep me from presenting it. Imagine if I even gave a portion of it, not the rebuttal period, but the part dealing with his book, at least that part. Imagine if I gave that on that platform. That would have swayed the audience into understanding, right, that we do have sound scholarship in our community, and we can rebut these false accusations and allegations that you make in regards to the biblical account of the Exodus and the ethnogenesis of these people called Ancient Israel, and the cultural inheritance or heritage that's been passed down to subsequent peoples over a period of time, and their scattering or their settlement in different areas after the Assyrian and Babylonian captivities, all right, which I'll go into probably in another lecture later on, and I'll talk more in depth about that. Thank you, Khalid is Eternal. He said between last night and tonight, you'd have owned it. And all these people have ones. Man, all y'all are up at almost 4 in the morning. I'm gonna end this off in a few minutes. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is here, family. This is the PowerPoint they didn't want you to see, because if all this information was on record, Jabari would have no argument. I can make a case for the existence of the ancient Israelites, a case for the Exodus, a case for their ethnogenesis, a case using strictly archaeological, historical records, and only use passages from the text as cultural literature to supplement areas where there are minor gaps. But I can make this whole argument without even using the Bible to do so. And this is what Jabari was afraid of. This is why in the debate, he kept trying to plug me back into the Bible instead of dealing with corrective history. He was the one that made the claim, if you watched earlier, that said, oh, well, he's not going to talk about the history of these people. He would rather talk to you about Adam and Eve and Noah and Shem, Japheth, and Ham. He'd rather talk to you about the myth, or rather talk to you about these characters than really dealing with the history of these people. Now, family, when did I use the Bible in this lecture to only show you the evidence for the existence of the ancient Israelites or the Exodus? I barely used the Bible. And when I did use the Bible, it was supplementary to the archaeological record. And I used it so that way I could show this guy, when you properly translate the verse where it says uncovering nakedness, and you're able to parse it in Hebrew, which goes to show your mechanical understanding of the language. And then you're able to look at extra biblical evidence to be able to syntax what occurred and see the bigger picture of Ham, Canaan, etc. Now you will fully know that the so-called curse that was on Canaan did not fall upon all of Ham's descendants, and Ham was blessed according to the literature by his deity, right? I mean, by his father, by the deity. The Most High blessed Shem, Ham, Japheth, and Noah. He blessed all of them to be fruitful and multiply, right? So when we look at this, and this is very important, family, when they say, Canaan was cursed or Ham was cursed because he had dark skin. I'm like, what? All of them was dark skinned. What are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? And then he ends off with his misinterpretation of the text. He is eisegeting the text because he's not properly exegeting it, because he is not familiar with the language, with the context, or with extra biblical evidence that gives you a wider bird's eye view of what actually occurred during that time. So in presenting this information, he only spoke about the peasant revolt model, which I told him is the same as the withdrawal model that he was referencing. He didn't even know the author of the JSTOR article that he pulled that was presenting the withdrawal model. And I'm like, what? I asked him, what is ethnic markers? He didn't even know what that is. This is pertinent in looking at the ethnogenesis of the people. He didn't know any of this stuff. So I'm saying to myself, who am I debating? Somebody that obviously has not studied the anthropological record of the emergence of the ancient Israelites and has an agenda to try and suppress it and make it seem like they're anti-African. And I'm showing him how could they be anti-African, because even from the text itself, there was a close affinity and relationship between Hamites and these Israelite peoples. Okay, family. All right. So with that, I thank you everybody for watching. The super chat is also available if anybody wants to donate, because I know I had some people inbox and text me how they can donate while this live stream is going on. You guys can definitely do a super chat if you want to donate. Otherwise, you can go to www.gofundme.com/Kingdom Harbinger. That's HARBINGER. And you can donate there if you like. Everybody has donated so far. Thank you for your support. Everybody that's been in this chat watching this extended PowerPoint powerhouse profound presentation, all P's. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to part 2, which I will also live stream, which will be the rest of my PowerPoint presentation. And remember, family, this was 143 slides. The Minority Report is almost 900 slides. So I pulled only from a few references from the Minority Report, which has almost 900 slides. So when people say there's no evidence for the ancient Israelites, there's no evidence for the Exodus, I'm like, but what are you looking at? Are you looking at it from the biased orthodox? Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Let me know. It should be sound now, family. Hit 1 if you can hear and see me now. Hit 1 if you can hear and see me now. Okay, so audio and visual is back. Okay. What was the last thing you guys heard me say? Can somebody just quote me real quick so I know where to pick up from? Somebody tell me the last thing you heard me say. Somebody give me a quick quote real quick, because I'm trying to end this out before 4 and also give somebody a chance to ask a question. Did y'all hear my follow-up? All right, well, I'm gonna summarize it again real quick in case y'all didn't hear it. What I'm saying is, it's obvious that you see why they tried to prevent me from showcasing this information, because what it will do is bring validity back to the biblical narrative and substantiated the archaeological and anthropological data that ascertains the ethnogenesis of the ancient Israelites that is similar to what we get in the biblical narrative, all right? So what my objective is to do is to contribute to my community as a servant of the Most High Yah, to the ancestors that came before me, and to my community at large, to contribute this information, this data, so it can be the status quo, so we can use it to buffer against anybody that resists against our culture and tries to disenfranchise us from our inheritance and our heritage that we have assumed and taken on today. So this information has to be the status quo in our community. We have to bond by it and use it as one of many means of being apologetic against those who are polymists against our worldview, and use it to protect and securitize what we are owning for ourselves to pass on to subsequent generations. The secular realm is trying to remove it from us. Some people in the conscious community and committed community are trying to remove it from us. We have to restore it with great methodology. And I'm gonna talk about my methodology in part 2, because I need to expound on that so that I can show you guys also how to do similar methodology and your approaches of epistemology, so you can ascertain claims, and you can move from the data all the way from a hypothesis to a thesis, all the way to your final conclusion when presenting an inductive analytical approach to the information that we are looking at and receiving today. And again, these people are following after the Copenhagen School of Biblical Minimalism, and this school has an agenda to attack the validity and authenticity of the biblical narrative as relating to archaeological and anthropological history of the ethnogenesis of the Israelites. Study the provenance and origins of the ideology that is the program behind the minds of people that attack our text, okay? And Jabari is a victim of the Copenhagen School of Biblical Minimalism. He has an agenda, and he doesn't even know about it. He doesn't even know where the program comes from, all right? So we got to resist these things. We got to understand these things. We got to know these things. And in doing so, we can put ourselves back on top, family. So again, you see why this lecture was detrimental to being played on the House of Consciousness or the platform, because Jabari's argumentation would have been done. There would have been no conversation if he was still making straw man arguments, right? He's trying to be the crows on a straw man, right? But then I'm showing him, no, that straw man is not me. I'm over here, deal with me. And again, his thing was, ironically, oh, well, instead of him dealing with the history of these peoples, he'd rather talk about the narrative of Adam and Eve and Noah, Shem, Yeth, and Ham. This is what he says I'd rather deal with. But as you can see from the presentation that I gave your family, I barely touched the Bible. I used it so I can showcase him that he is misinterpreting the text by not properly exegeting it, and also presenting the extra biblical data that ascertains what actually occurred, right? Because when I parsed through it and I actually broke it down for you guys, I am demonstrating my mechanical linguistical understanding of the text, and also going to extra biblical references to validate the full bird's eye view of what occurred at that time, right? And again, you can't make the argument that Ham was cursed or Canaan was cursed because they were black. That would make the whole family black. That's ludicrous, right? And again, when you understand it had to do with him selling in a different region that was not his inheritance, and why his descendants had to be kicked out of the land, you fully understand what's going on. But family, all of this stuff is important. All I wanted to do was use the text in this lecture to supplement the archaeological data and give you things such as ethnic markers, which Jabari didn't know what the hell ethnic markers was. I asked him, tell me the chronological worldview or viewpoint of Amahai Mazar, which he didn't know, but yet he quoted the dude in his book. I asked him about the various models and the ethnogenesis of Israelites, and he couldn't cite none of the models for me. That goes to show these people are not schooled in this arena, right? They're not schooled in this arena, and they have an agenda. Let's not let that agenda defeat our community, or let the moment in which they attack us ruin our momentum going forward to provide a socio-political and economic solution to our community, which we see encased in the scriptures. We can win, we could do it, family, and if we all all come together and buy behind objective scholarship. So you got to be able to present your culture objectively, so that way you can give an unbiased worldview on how things emerge and how you've inherited today. And if you're able to do so, you can quiet or mute a lot of dissenters, all right, or people who are opponents against you, all right? So hopefully y'all enjoyed this. And hopefully Jabari sees this and you can get a sample of the work that I do. And also, family, tune in to part 2, which is a follow-up to this. And I'm going to finish the rest of the presentation. Like I said, it's just 142 slides. And I pulled some of it from the Minority Report, which is a 900-slide presentation, right? Minority Report part 2 is going to go more in depth, more meticulously with some of the things that I reference here with more data to validate it. And I'm also going to show you the conspiracy against the minority voice professors, PhDs, archaeologists, anthropologists that have shown evidence that the biblical narrative lines up with the archaeological data that's being suppressed by the secular world, right? And they're funding Tel Aviv University, right? So that way they can bring a secular view of the emergence or the ethnogenesis of these ancient Israelites and fund that to be in the media everywhere and silence the minority reports, which also who have the same credentials as Israel Finkelstein and Neil Silberman, and they show their contentions for this Bible and Earth work, this chronological assertion, all of these things. They don't want you to see this information, but I'm going to bring all of it to the forefront. And we're going to use this data so that way we can overturn those who make false allegations against the emergence and existence of our ancient ancestors, family. So with that, family, I love you guys. Throw me a question real quick, and then I'm cutting this live stream off. I've been on here long enough. It's 4 in the morning. I got to get some sleep. I know some of y'all too. For those of you who was inboxing me and messaging me about how to donate, you can hit the super chat button if you want to do a donation directly through this chat or this Google Hangout session, or you can go to www.gofundme.com/Kingdom Harbinger, and you can send a donation there as well. Those links will also be in the description box. So again, family, I love you. I thank you for watching. Let me see. If they support the peasant revolt model and say Canaan was cursed with black skin and were Africans, or they admit in Israel were black Africans, that's a good question. And I will pose that question to them. All right. So Yaram Yahoo, send me a message on YouTube so that way I can take that message, that question, and ask it to them. Because that's a great question. Again, they have not looked at all the data that I just showed you guys. And this is not even all my presentation. But imagine how much damage control Jabari would have to do with his book and his worldview if he was to see what I presented to you guys tonight. It would have been a fatal blow to his argumentation, because people would have saw that all he was doing was creating straw mans the whole night to beat up. And he cannot deal with somebody who objectively can present their culture from an unbiased lens with the evidence to substantiate it, right? With the sole purpose of getting somebody to accept the data that they have not considered so they can look at it from a more unbiased view. And he wasn't built to do that. He had an agenda. Like I said, the Copenhagen School of Biblical Minimalism is a program that was in his brain in dealing with me. So he had to lock me into the Bible because he saw I was a monster, I was a beast outside of that. So he had to keep locking me into the Bible and the narrative. And that's why when he was asking these questions, he had to keep circling back to the same questions over and over again to not allow me or to filibuster me from asking questions, and to also preventing me from giving some more of my premise that you guys seen in this presentation. All right. Somebody says, do you subscribe to the New Testament? I subscribe to the Brit Hadashah, or the reconstructed New Testament, right? And this is done through textual criticism, historical accounts, etc. And I'm gonna do a video on that so you guys can see my stance on that later on this year. You guys can definitely check out some of my lecture that I've done. One called The Patriarchal Priesthood in the Bible Unveiled. Go back and check out that lecture. The one that says Capital Punishment, Human Sacrifice for the Atonement of Sin in the Bible. Go back and look into that lecture. And you'll see, at least with those two lectures, you'll see my particular worldview in regards to the Brit Hadashah. Or you can go back and look at the videos for the teleconference videos that I have up on my YouTube channel, where I also speak about that as well. All right. Somebody says Jabari didn't like Divine schooling him. He went to bed hot that night. Exactly. Now imagine when this video comes out and we as Israel make it viral, so that way he can see what I was actually going to present. He's going to have to, I told him, he's going to have to edit his book. He's going to have to redo his book. He's going to have to do a new revision to his book. He has to, because otherwise people just keep referring back to this PowerPoint presentation and saying, Jabari, you missed this, you missed that. Somebody says, can you do a full video on the Melchizedek priesthood? I did a video on it. Go to Capital Punishment, Human Sacrifice for the Atonement of Sin in the Bible. Watch that video, and you'll see at the second half of that video, I go into the Melchizedek order. It's very profound, very deep, very profound. So Yaram Yahoo, go back and check that out. Does anybody else have a last question about the presentation? It's about 60 y'all in here. Let me know. Otherwise, I'm cutting it short and going to bed. Anybody has a last minute question? Let me know. I can't deal with that about who are the 12 tribes today. I'm not going to do it here. I'm not going to do it here because that's unrelated to the PowerPoint. But I'll note that question, and you can always ask me that at a later live stream that I do. Okay, that will make him money. Divine Battle is raising his funds and profile. Never heard of dude before Rael. Have to let that pride thing go. I agree, and I'm willing to upgrade my information if I come across new information. You know, and I strive to be as modest as I can. I'm not there to make a name for myself. I'm not there to talk bad about people. Y'all know I don't get down like that. You know what I'm saying? So I don't have no agenda. Only thing I have is to present information and data that substantiates my culture and why I subscribe to it. Just to clarify, the Shashu were a mix of Edomites. Yeah, the Shashu in the region of Northwest Arabia were a mixture of Edomites, Midianites, and Israelites in the Trans-Jordan, right? But there was also Shashu that was in the land of Canaan, right? All the way up to, from the Negev, all the way up to Syria. So the Shashu were Bedouin peoples who was not really a nation or a collective polity of people. And they were identified either based on the region that they were picked up from, the deity which they worship, like we see Yod-Hey-Wav, the area that they were in, and who, you know, the name of the place that they was at, like Se'er or Hor, the deity who they subscribed to, as we see the Shashu of Yod-Hey-Wav, or their importance in that region, because the Egyptians will always go back and grab Bedouins and Shashus and bring them back into captivity. But these were people that were living on the fringes of society. That's why they were semi-nomadic pastoralists and semi-agriculturalists that were wandering in Canaan, and they were not really settled in any one place. All right. So the Edomites would consider Shashu, the Midianites would consider Shashu, and the Israelites would consider Shashu. And if you go back and watch this video, you'll see all the evidence that I gave in the articles that I referenced and cited and read from that validate this. All right. Did you answer the Melchizedek question? My video went out. Yes, I did. I said, Yaram Yahoo, go back and watch Capital Punishment, Human Sacrifice for the Atonement of Sin in the Bible. And I go in depth into the Melchizedek order in that video. All right. Khaled is Eternal said, I referred to that video. Black App said, that's what I like about how you teach, you dig deep. Yes, I have to. I'm very meticulous. I'm a perfectionist, unfortunately, which causes me to procrastinate sometimes, and I got to work on that. But, you know, I want to make sure people know that I know what I'm talking about. When I talk about certain things, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm very well referenced. I have source citations from academic experts that verify my findings, my conclusions, and I speak to these professors, right, on a frequent basis to verify my claims, to get more information from them. So I'm a think tank for our community. That's what I'm here to do, to contribute this to y'all so y'all can use it in your various areas or aspects of your livelihood, to share it or whatever. But family, we have to make this video viral. Tomorrow, when y'all see this notification pop up, right, make it viral, share it everywhere, because everybody needs to see this information. You understand? All right. So with that, family, I try to provide quality work. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm not telling y'all to donate, but for those who are asking to donate to my hard-earned energy, effort, time, you know, I gave you the 2 references of which you could do so. You can also check it out in the description link. It will be greatly appreciated if you did, because it will empower me to keep giving you all this information and providing me and affording me more time to dedicate into doing this. Again, you're not obligated to do it, but for those who want to honor my time, energy, and effort, I gave you the ways to do so. And please, family, keep me in prayer, right? Because a lot goes out of me when I do these type of studies. I lose sleep. I have sleepless nights. Sometimes I don't eat because I be fasting. So many things I do to give this information to our community, so that way we can be better confident when conveying our worldview to those who don't subscribe to it. All right. So I do it because I love you, family, and I'm a servant to you guys first, even at my own expense. And with that, family, thank you for watching. Stay tuned to part 2, but share this video everywhere so that everybody can see it and we can increase the numbers and awareness of the data information that's in there. So that way, the opponents of what it is that we subscribe to will have to change up their game plan. They're going to need a new game plan after this. After the Minority Report Part 2, they definitely going to need a new game plan, right? And that's going to come out later on this year. But at least with this, which is a amalgamation of Minority Report Part 1, Minority Report Part 2, and dealing with Jabari's book, it's an amalgamation of this to expel all the straw mans and to be able to give you guys some great data that you can use to defend your subscription. All right. So I love you, family. Peace, shalom, black power, and that be that. Only the truth. Send me a message and we can talk about that, my brother. All right. Thank you, Sign of the Times. I appreciate it. Jay Fearson, check out the video on the channel titled New Testament Messiah. Yes, that one goes into it as well. An associate or colleague of mine did that video. Thank you for those who said that they will be donating. Thank you, Yarum Yahoo, for that compliment. You know, I wouldn't say I'm the best, but if that's how you view it, I appreciate that. I'm striving to be one of the best, you know, because I haven't been in the community for as long as I would need to be. But I said, if I'm going to be in here, let me make a major contribution. Let me leave a legacy behind that can sow the seeds for the generation to come. That's all I'm here to do, is to serve, family. And I love you guys. So with that, thank you, family. I want to say peace, shalom, and black power. Stay tuned to part 2 that's coming up soon, and share this video tomorrow and the rest of this week. Peace, family.